What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first Hytale HQ episode. And today we are going to be talking all about Hytale's new skill system that uses ability and modifier runes that was announced in the recent Chapter 1 blog post. If you want to support the podcast, be sure to subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. And if you want to make your mark on the podcast, join the Discord channel where you can recommend guests, suggest topics, or suggest questions for the guests that we have on. For today's guest, we have a guy that is widely known as the combat guy of Hytale, at least in the creator base side of thing. Enjoys a lot of PvP combat, and that is Chayzur. What's up, Chayzur?
Hey guys, my name is Chayzur. I'm overrated, but I'm still good. I do video essays and PvP stuff. So yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for
you're
having me.
you're quite you're very interested in not only just like playing PvP, but you're like super interested in the mechanic side of things and like actually how it all works too, right?
Yes, yes.
All right, perfect guy to have on here. We also have Brokenminifridge, a PvE player extraordinaire, enjoyer of combat. Minifridge, how's it going, dude?
Hello, it's nice to be here for the first time ever at all.
Okay, yeah. If you haven't seen, I've put this out there everywhere, but we've already done this once. We recorded the whole thing, everything I tested and made sure it was working, but I had a failure on OBS and it didn't actually capture the audio due to a plugin that I use. And after a couple days of the fetal position, inside of my bedroom, just crying to myself, we're back again. I've tested everything. I reset up everything up, and I think we're good to go now. We even did a test recording, so no more do overs. This is it. This is the final countdown right here.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so the topic at hand today is combat and the skill system. For those that maybe are currently unaware, you live under a rock. The Hytale Chapter 1 blog post came out pretty recently, and that blog post showcased the new skill system. Let me switch us over to that real quick. There we go. And the new skill system was announced here in the blog post, and we're going to kind of go over it as we go, but it showcases these new skill runes and these new modifier runes and an interaction system where these different components that like happen in the world, abilities, and environment, etc., can kind of interact together. So we're going to be deep diving into these things. So I wanted to start out with talking about like how we feel about combat as it exists in Hytale right now, which is fairly simple. To preface before I go over to Chaser and Broken here, you only have a few ways to really combat. Every weapon does have its own kind of unique attack to it, but you have your normal left click hit, you have a hold left click like charged attack, and you have a like special ability that you charge up by doing damage. You hit the Q button or whatever you have it bound to, and it does like this big special attack. And for the most part, that's how combat in Hytale works. Some of the moves are, kind of cool and unique, especially depending on what other game you may have come from before Hytale. But the rune system is going to kind of crack this open. But before we jump into that, Chayzur, how do you feel about combat in Hytale right now? Like, how do you feel like it goes? What are your thoughts on it currently?
Well, I think before the latest pre-release, it was really rough. The latest, very recently there was a pre-release that came out that I publicly announced that I thought was a good change, and I proceeded to get crucified on Twitter for it. But essentially, the stamina system needs a major rework. There's a lot of problems with it, and there's a lot of the, at least PvP wise, a lot of the combat is based off of like abusing bugs that kind of are a band-aid fix to a bigger problem that can't really be solved as fast as we'd like. So as it stands right now, it's I think it's getting there, but it's just not where it needs to be, and it's not really super close. But I think with the newest pre-release, where basically they patched a lot of bugs with how stamina works, I think we're heading in the right direction. But I think that real combat and the real good stuff is going to come with the rune system. But I think for now we're in. It's tolerable, is what I'll say.
So, like, you talk about these, like stamina being bad right now, and then there's some like broken like interactions. Can you give like an example of that so those that maybe don't know what the heck you're talking about can kind of picture it a little bit?
Yeah, so most people would probably think that combat is what it looks like in the game to you. Like when you load up the game, you fight a mob, you're just clicking and, you have basically a succession of hits that change based off of the order that you are slashing in. So, like, for example, the sword, it's like a very fast slash. The second hit is a
Mhm.
very fast slash, and the third hit is a more powerful but slower kind of like overhand hit. And these are the fundamentals to these weapons. But other players have figured out that you can animation cancel, which is basically where there are many ways to do it, but the most common way I would say is just blocking the moment that your weapon makes impact or does damage to a mob or player. And that's not really a bug that can be fixed, but it's something that if a player knows how to do that, then the other player who they are fighting stands no chance. So there's that, which is not really it's a very hard problem to fix. But the bigger problem until now was the stamina bug with the mace, which is basically there was a bug with the mace that when you swing it, you you instantly start regaining stamina, which
Okay.
was just not something that was intended at all. So players would essentially use the axe because it's the most powerful weapon, and the moment that they start draining stamina, they'd switch to their mace, hit for half a second, and then switch back to their axe, thus having infinite stamina. And this was the core PvP community's way of fighting. That's like, and there's many bugs beyond that, but the mace stamina bug is the most infamous and the root of stamina, essentially.
Is that what they fixed in the update? Because I'm actually unaware of that. Did they take that out?
Yes, they changed a lot of things. They patched the mace stamina bug. They buffed the first two uh damage intervals of the dagger. So like the first two hits, they buffed the damage of.
Okay.
Um, and they made it so that stamina regenerates faster. Like the delay in between when you would gain stamina is now there's a shorter delay.
Okay. Cool. So that's kind of like the PvP analysis of it. Obviously, it had a lot of really big implications there. Moving to you, Broken. How do you feel about combat right now as it relates to going through the game and playing the PvE side of Hytale, fighting mobs, fighting some of the bigger, like supposed to be harder mobs? Like, what's your feeling of it?
Right now, the physical combat itself, for the most part, I'd say is like right at the bar of what I'd expect early on for at least for first person melee combat in a game
Yeah.
like this. It's incredibly similar to Skyrim's, which a lot of people hate still, but it works well enough for, people to still keep playing Skyrim. So it could work for Hytale, but I am very glad that they're expanding upon it. The biggest problem with PvE combat isn't even the player side of things, it's just how simple the enemy AI is right now.
Um, and I'll add to that too because I have some thoughts on it as well. Some things that I don't like. Um, I I mean, I definitely appreciate that like there's these different moves based on the different weapons and that sort of thing, but I definitely think the way that PvE combat works is very easy to take advantage of because you have
Yeah.
something like daggers that have their charged attack as a dash that you can make a much bigger dash if you jump at the right moment, carry that momentum forward, and then when you hit an enemy, you can bounce off of them, and if you're holding your backwards key S or whatever it may be for you, you bounce back further. So most mobs, if they don't have like a ranged attack, you could typically just like dagger dash and bounce off of them infinitely until they die and not like put yourself in too much danger. Obviously, mobs that have ranged attack are gonna, be a little bit different of a challenge. Um, but would you say that's consistent with kind of like your experience and what you think,
Yeah,
Broken?
it's it's PvP PvE is not a very difficult experience so long as you have like the recommended level of gear for wherever you are, then you're probably going to be fine unless you're going out of your way to just tank damage and not block it all. Then it's a pretty easy experience. But of course, that's just because they've been working on more important things than just the
Yeah.
base combat system.
Absolutely. And then on the PvP side, one of my bigger things that I've had a big annoyance of when I've played in a PvP environment is just the dagger movement generally. Um, so I guess I would probably relate this to both PvP and PvE. Is if you've played Hytale, you probably know that like moving with daggers is the easy thing to do, right? You just hold charge, you hit block right after, so you carry a little bit extra momentum, and that's just kind of how you travel around the world when you're playing a PvE. It's pretty quick, it's pretty easy. It kind of like pigeonholes you to always having your daggers on you. And then, at least for me, I don't know about both of you guys, but for me, whenever I'm playing, for the most part, I probably only have daggers on me. Maybe I have one other weapon with me just in case I want to swap to it, but it's pretty rare that I do. Would you say that's kind of consistent with your experience playing right now? You dagger move around, and because you don't really need more than daggers, you don't really feel forced to carry something else to just fight mobs in the game?
I typically, just for diversity and then also different use cases, I carry like 3 to 4 weapons in my hotbar at a time. One's always the daggers, of course. And
Mhm.
then I'm partial to the mace, mostly because of how easy it is for crowd control if you're fighting multiple things at
Yeah,
once. And then aesthetically, I like the sword and shield, so I also usually have a sword on me as well.
gotcha. What about you, Chaser?
I mean, for PvP, you're at a significant disadvantage if you're not carrying every single weapon because it's just the the skill gap is being able to use all of them. For PvE wise, like for exploration mode, I just probably out of force of habit, I still carry all of them just because, I mean, maybe not the mace anymore, just because for me the only redeeming factor for the mace was the infinite stamina, and so just to me personally, compared to the other weapons, it just seems like pointless to me, just because the axe. I know the axe is just like the heavy hitter, and
Mhm.
the mace is really good. The ult I think is pretty strong, but I think that we're in a kind of state of Hato right now where it's like you build up your ultimate so slow that by the time you kill an enemy, you only have like a quarter of your bar, so you never really get to use it because obviously you're gonna switch off or something. So yeah, I'd say probably all of them.
Yeah, and then you don't get to save it either. So if you have
Yeah.
to switch away to another weapon or even just to like heal or something, because that's usually my thing is like I'll be fighting, I'll build up my ult, but like I've taken a lot of chip damage, so now I have like less than half health left. So I feel like okay, I kind of got to switch off so I can eat something, and then my ult charge is all gone.
What I think would be a cool way to handle this is if you have some ult charge, if you put away your weapon, as long as you don't switch to a completely separate weapon, it would be nice if it keeps the amount of charge you have. Like if you're in a
Mm.
cave and you're using a two-handed weapon, then you can't have a torch in your offhand. So if you want to put down a torch or even see where you're going, you have to put your weapon away, and then there goes your signature ability charge.
My idea around this that I had, and I guess it does carry over to the new rune system, which we're going to get to in a little bit, is that I think that you should retain your alt charge until either if you use a different weapon, it resets, or it would have like a decay to it. So like let's say you switch to eat something, you have like 3 seconds to where after you switch away from your weapon, it's not decaying, and then after that 3 seconds, over the course of the next maybe 3 seconds or whatever, it would decay down from full down to zero. So if you want a quick swap to eat something, maybe pop a potion or something, you can do that. Like you can get away with that. But if you swap over to another weapon, that ult charge can't be used for that other weapon. And then if you use that other weapon, the ult charge is instantly gone on the weapon you used previously.
I think that could work.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. What do you think, Broken?
Yeah, that works.
All right, cool. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what they're going to do. I imagine it's something they're probably going to touch eventually once the runes get in because there's probably going to be a need to. But it was a
I
good,
mean,
yeah.
I think like it's also hard to say how good the signatures are gonna be compared to the runes. Like one of my things was like I'm I'm not like worried because I don't really care too much, but I'm interested to see like if the signature abilities get overshadowed by the runes, and just no one really cares about them because the runes, just like from what we've seen, they just look so ridiculously like insane that I
Yeah.
don't know if you know what I mean.
I
Yeah, they're
They need to
think
be
probably gonna have
overshadowed.
to like
they
rebalance
yeah.
all damage in a, or like all like the PvE side first, probably, but then the player side too. Like because I think, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on what route they want to go, right? There's two big routes they can go. They can go the more RPG route, which is a lot of times like enemies take a lot more to kill. You're fighting one enemy, you're fighting less enemies for more time. Or they can go the ARPG route, which is they put more enemies on your screen and your abilities just kind of blow them up, but then you come across like elites and bosses and stuff like that, which are going to probably require more of that like ultimate hit type thing to actually kill and clear them.
I think I have a feeling that's the approach they're gonna take. We're just a whole bunch of weak guys that you could kill in like, one hit or with an AoE thing.
Yeah.
Just because of at least how enemies spawn right now in exploration mode. Some like Outlander camps, there's a lot of
Oh
them
yeah.
at one time.
There's a lot. And they hurt too, by the way. And we also know Simon like is pulling inspiration from, they're pulling, I guess, from RPG and like MMOs and ARPGs. So I guess they could kind of go either any way. Um, Here we'll like side topic on this for just a second because this is kind of a fun conversation. I'm curious what you guys prefer because me personally, I always think it's fun to just like see a whole bunch of stuff die in a game. So I would kind of like that ARPG route where like they increase the amount of mob spawns that we see. Maybe they do less damage to us, the player, or our defenses are better. We can tank more hits from normal mobs. And like we get to use our abilities and then like we get to blow up like 10, 15 enemies at a time on the screen and just see stuff die and see loot pop out and that sort of thing. I think it's really fun. And then we'll probably want to kind of like save our alt charge. And then when we come up against those elite mobs, like that's when it's worth it to use it. It's not worth it to use it on the normal mobs unless you just have a big pack and you just want to see them all explode in this like big fiery craziness. But you would probably more save your alt charge for like some of the harder mobs to fight. How would you feel about that, Chayzur? Or do you like which way do you like more? Do you want to blow up more stuff or have more engaging combat against lesser enemies? Like which do you think is better?
Um, it's just tricky because like eventually we're gonna get to a point where there's just so much stuff to know and learn about combat. Like, like from one of the screenshots, we see that we can have like enchantments or like slash modifiers.
Yeah.
So when you couple that with like the art, like just the base weapon itself, with the signature ability and the runes, there's just kind of a lot. There's a lot happening with one weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it does. Now thinking about it, it would make more sense to have a signature be more against like a boss or something.
Yeah.
But I do think that maybe this is just me, but I think that the signatures are kind of too underwhelming to be used up against a boss. Like when you compare it to something as crazy as like an elemental attack. Like, I
Yeah.
imagine using like a grand elemental attack. Like if I want to do like a lightning storm or something like that. Like I imagine that being used up against a boss, not like, what we have now, just like I don't know, like a fast jab, like with the sword. Like, it just seems kind of, especially with like the RPG aspects, it just seems like it wouldn't make sense and it's kind of lame. So I don't know. Like I don't really know what approach they're gonna take with the signatures moving forward with the rune system, and that's why that's kind of like the base of like why it's so hard for me to form an opinion on that because
What if they
we might.
made signatures from a thing you have to charge into a cooldown ability that's tied specifically to the weapon instead of the runes you have equipped?
So instead of making it something you build up, it's just like an additional normal ability, but it's special to that weapon.
Exactly.
Mm. I personally, I guess here's what I think is Chazer's definitely right. The signatures they're cool as they are in the game right now, but that's because we're just comparing them against left click. Whereas like these ability runes are going to be like actual moves. It kind of almost feels like the ultimates we have now are actually more in line with what the abilities are going to be. I think of like the two-handed mace, that it's just a hammer slam down. So like that's almost feels like a normal ability. The whirlwind on the axe, like spin to win type gameplay is kind of normal in ARPG games. So it almost feels like a normal ability. So maybe those actually get shifted over to ability runes, and then they come up with some like really crazy stuff for the ultimate. Maybe the charge builds up slower, but you don't lose it. I don't know. But I do think that's a good thing for them to like that's gonna have to be something they focus on. Because if they want to leave it as an ultimate ability, it needs to feel ultimate when you use it. It needs to feel like this thing is gonna just destroy like everything in the whole room, or it's gonna do a big chunk out of this boss, or like take this elite to like half health or
Technically,
something.
they're called signature abilities, not
True.
ultimate abilities. So if they keep the name the same, it doesn't have to be a super
Yeah.
massive mega anime move. It could just be signature to the specific weapon type. So I
Yeah.
think if you put it on a cooldown, you'd most likely be able to use it way more than you can right now with having to charge it up, which
Yeah.
means that it'll be more. It won't feel as underwhelming as like a rune ability, just because you can actually use it more than like once every few hours, just because of whatever you're fighting and how you're fighting it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd probably be fine either way. Like, I like that way. I think that would be really fun. If they want to like more shift it to like the ultimate ability type way, I think that could be fun too if they did it right.
I think I'm like you may agree with me here, Prowl, but like I'm thinking more of like a Path of Exile thing. Like this is just how the way I see it. Like I see like the way that they were describing it, it makes it sound like the elemental, like the runes are going to be a like a common thing that's going to happen. Like if it's like you know, it's just as important as your left click, like these runes are. Not talking about like the
Yeah.
specials.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think that like I still I still think that they gotta there needs to be something changed about the signatures or something, because I genuinely feel like it would be kind of immersion breaking and just flat out like it would just kind of be silly if you're sitting there like critting out a boss with like all these like fire and magic abilities, and then you build up this grand like attack, and then it's just like a, like slightly more damage like slash like I don't know
Yeah.
like I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do about that. So
Yeah.
I
I
think that's
think for
something that
sure if
needs to
they're
be
gonna
done.
if it's gonna be a quote unquote ultimate, they're gonna have to go like grand with it. And I think I'd be okay with it to the point where like it takes a decent amount longer to build up. But once you have it, like it's gonna like do some serious damage. But if they wanted to go like Brokenminifridge's route too, of like, hey, it's a weapon specific ability that's on a cooldown that is strong, but it's not like it's nothing crazy. I think that would fit too. I think they could go either way and pull it off. So I guess we'll just kind
Yeah,
of see what they do. But yeah, I think they could go either way on it and it'd be okay. I think the
yeah,
ultimate ability thing is cooler though. Like if they pulled that off, that would be cooler and more fun than it just being a kind of normalish ability on cooldown.
yeah. I mean, unless they just, I don't know, if they took it a step further and like, I mean, like I don't even know what modifiers are supposed to be. Like it's just we have such like little information on that. Like maybe the modifier is just changing a fundamental part of the weapon. Like it would just be cool if like you could change certain elements of the weapons.
Yeah.
Like
I mean
or
that's how they
like
work in Path of Exile 2, and I think the original one. I haven't played the original one, but I've played Path of Exile 2. And like they have the ability gems and then the modifier gems. And like they change like core fundamental stuff sometimes about how the ability works, or they add extra effects to it. Like they have hundreds of these things. So there's definitely a lot of like inspiration to have to pull from there, and it'll probably make the skills that we use really cool, which I think, going to your point, means that it will, if regular skills can be that cool, then this like signature or ultimate ability kind of has to either be equally as cool if it's a signature, or way more cool and powerful to like some crazy extent if it's like an ultimate. So
yeah.
yeah, I guess we'll have to see how they do it, but for sure, like they definitely have some figuring out to do with that.
Yeah.
Here I want to jump into the conversation about the ability rune system really quick. And to do that, here I'm going to pull it up on screen really quick just to give people like the example context, which is like this is kind of how it looks right here. You have an ability rune. That's just like an attack that you get to do, right? You could have a fireball attack, an ice ball attack, a lightning bolt attack. You could have a ground slam, a twirly slash. Like think of like a cool move that you've seen done with any kind of weapon, and that's what an ability rune is. An ability rune is your ability to use a skill with a weapon. And we're pretty sure that the ability runes will be equipped to the player. So you as the player have the ability rune equipped on yourself, and then that enables you to use that ability with the weapon that you have in your hand. And then you have the modifier runes, up to two of them, at least for now, from what we've seen, that modify what that core ability can do. So the example they gave here was there's a fireball. We've added a shock rune to it, or a shock modifier to it. So you see like these little electricity bolts coming through the fireball that would maybe do additional damage. Maybe it would chain lightning off of the fireball hit. Maybe it would put on some type of debuff to the enemies you hit. It could do one of those things, right? And then a split rune makes it, instead of one fireball, it being two. In theory, you could maybe do two split runes and then have four fireballs, or all sorts of like different variety of things. And then the other example they gave here was a ground slam. So that would be like with your big two-handed hammer, kind of like the special ability that we have with the two-handed hammer mace in the game right now. You go and you slam down with it, and then it has a chill on it. So it would do a chill effect to the enemies. Maybe that's extra damage. Maybe it's a slow or a root type ability or something like that that does some type of crowd control to them. And then you have a radius rune, which would make the area in which that affects enemies larger. So that's like an overview of what the rune system is. So with that being said, um, Brokenminifridge, let me start with you. How do you feel about the ability rune system as a whole from what we know about it so far? Like, what's your thoughts on it? Do you like it, dislike it? Explain.
I think it's a great approach to dealing with magic and abilities, given the nature of Hytale as a sandbox game, because you're supposed to be able to. I think when we first get them, you'll be able to find them, but you'll also later be able to craft them as well. So
Hmm.
it'll encourage exploration to find more runes and abilities and stuff. And then it's also a system I'm somewhat familiar with. I've never played Path of Exile, but I've played a lot of Destiny 2, and that has a ability system called the Aspect and Fragment system,
Okay.
where aspects will majorly overhaul one of your abilities, and then fragments, you can have multiple of at the same time, and those all do a bunch of minor things, but depending on which ones you have, it'll make a completely unique build to someone else, even if they have the same aspect as you equipped.
Okay. And how do you think that's going to fit into the PvE side of things?
It'll definitely make things more fun because right now it's very simple and repetitive, and it gets boring pretty quickly unless you're fighting like a horde of enemies. But that's fun for a completely separate reason because you're
Yeah.
still just really holding left click and blocking over and over again.
And Chayzur, how do you feel about the ability rune system, both just as like from a game design perspective, and like how well do you think it looks like it's going to work in the game, and then how do you perceive it playing in a PvP environment?
I definitely think it's a really smart decision, like Fridge said, for a sandbox game. There's a lot of opportunities there. It really benefits more than it benefits pretty much every part of the game. Just because, like he said, it was just exploration. It just gives a lot of encouragement to go explore and find them, and it gives a lot of room for creativity. So it's very fitting for a sandbox game. For PvP, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it's gonna be rough in the beginning when they aren't balanced, and I think that's okay. I think that's perfectly okay. It's bound to happen. Honestly, for probably a significant amount of time. Like I would possibly argue until like 1.0 launch, until everything's like perfectly balanced, just because there will objectively be metas. There will be some that are better than others until they get around to balancing them. But I think for where we are in the game right now, I think the priority should just be having fun. So I think it's gonna be super fun. Like, I'm thinking of like SMP content with like having, large scale battles with like a bunch of different like builds going on. I think there's going to be a lot of room for like player interaction and stuff. So I think overall it's great for every part of the game for sure.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because I definitely feel like it's the best way that I can think of that you can do a like make an RPG system work in a sandbox. Because if you like make people level up, if you make people click on skill points and stuff like that, it starts to pigeonhole you a lot. You kind of have a path that you kind of have to take. And if there's like leveling up things involved, that makes it hard for, well, what if I've been playing on my world for 3 months and then all of a sudden I think I want to invite my buddy Chayzur to come play with me. Okay, well, now for Chayzur to be able to play with me, he's got to like level up first. So now he has to do this needless level up grind when maybe we don't want him to do that. I just want him to come in and like start running some dungeons with me or something. And with something like the rune system, you could do that, right? I could have the runes already ready that I've already collected. I can give him the gear, give him the runes, give him whatever, and then we're ready to go. Like we can play. That's the sandbox way of doing it. And then I guess the second part of it too is like you get to build your own skill system. It'll be fun to see somebody do the math once we actually have some like hard numbers. But imagine when we have I don't even know how many like weapons exist on the back end in Hytale that we haven't like aren't even in the game yet. Let's say there's just a dozen, right? Probably more than that. But let's say there's a dozen weapons, and then between those dozen weapons, you have 25 different skills that they start out with. And then you have another 25 modifier runes on top of that. Like 12 weapons times 25 skill runes times 25 modifier runes and 2 slots for those modifier runes on top of that. You got to have like hundreds of thousands or millions of like possibilities that you could potentially run at the end of the day. And that's so cool. Like that's a sandbox, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. It was very very smart on there, and especially for the sandbox approach.
And the thing I like about it even more, I think, is like it's so easy to add to. Um, it's not like when you have like an RPG skill-based level up system, you have to slot in the right skill and the right area of the skill tree and like think about what points people can allocate to stuff. You don't have to think about any of that. You could just add a new skill and that's it. Like here's a new ability rune. We make sure it's kind of balanced with everything else. Have fun. Or here's a new modifier rune that does some other crazy thing. Have fun. I like that. I think that's really cool because it's so easy for them. It's very modular. Like they can just add to it or take away from it if something's like really broken whenever they want to.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if they do like themed skills over the updates, because like, I mean, obviously runes don't have a lot of correlation for like a like chapter one, because it's kind
Mhm.
of just they're just trying to introduce like as many. I think chapter one is definitely like setting up the rest of the game by adding a ton of different like fundamental features so that they can kind of expand on all of them individually later. And I think runes was kind of just like a random thing to throw in there because it has zero correlation to the goblin stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm really glad it is there. I think it'd be cool like in the future, like if there like I think just for example, like if there was like a Skylands or a Zone 5 chapter, then they could introduce like, I don't know, runes like for the lightning element or something like that, or just do more themed runes as the updates go on. Like if there are like if there's like a set of runes that are being added per chapter, like it's just gonna get crazier and crazier and crazier over time.
Yeah. Actually, I haven't. You made me think of this. Like, there's no reason they can't do that with the Goblin theme. And here's an example. And I'm gonna get your opinion on this. Broken Mini Fridge. What you think about this? So, like with these skill runes, they could really do whatever they want. So like they could have, no, they could add in as a weapon in the game a wrench or something that's kind of related to like mechanisms in some way, right? And then a skill rune that you could have would be a turret. And then like you place down this little like contraption looking thing that the goblins would have invented, and it like it shoots things, and it would have probably its own health bar, and it would consume something, so you can't just spam them everywhere. So they would have it balanced, of course, but you could have that, or you could have some type of like mechanical like summon creature, or I don't know, like something that shoots a laser beam out. I don't know. They could come up with like some things that would feel kind of gadgety that are themed around the goblins, and I think they could even get away with stuff like that. What do you think, Mini Fridge?
Yeah, I think steampunk can fit in high fantasy settings, and goblins are almost steampunk.
Hmm.
There's probably a more accurate word for what their whole vibe is, like scrap punk or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but like we could easily see like rudimentary technology in Hytale, and it'd work perfectly fine because Dungeons and Dragons does steampunk like in their official adventures, so it could absolutely work. One thing I will mention is you when you phrase how abilities work, you are saying it like we know for sure that if you want to use specific abilities, you have to have a specific weapon that they're correlated to in your hand, and we don't know for sure. So like
Yeah, this is
we
true.
don't know if you want to use ground slam, we don't know if you need to have a mace in your hand or if you could ground slam with any weapon. Because in some games with abilities, I'm going to use Destiny as an example again. There's a subclass called the Gunslinger, and your ultimate is you pull out a flaming pistol with 6 shots in it that do really high damage. You do not need to have a pistol equipped in order to use this ability. You pull it out of thin air.
Yeah.
So I am curious if they're going to go that route or if it's going to be like, if you want to cast Fireball, you better have some sort of staff in your hand. It could
Um,
go either way.
First, just because I have it pulled up on screen, you know, you talk about like I like that phrase scrap punk. Somebody needs to like use that officially. But that's kind of like that's the vibe you get from like the goblin boss here that I have pulled up on screen right now, is like you get that scrap punk kind of vibe. Like the goblins built this machine like thing that you're gonna have to fight as a boss, and have a cannon on it, and it shoots out fire, and it has this big like ball and chain thing hanging from it that it's going to swing around. So it definitely fits the vibe. I think that they could do that kind of stuff. And then I would say when it comes to what you were saying there with how skills and hold on a second, my dog's barking. I'm going to put a cut right here. Give me 2 seconds to shut it up.
Yep.
Hello, Editor Prowl.
Hello. The goblins built this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Unironically.
All right, gotta love Amazon deliveries. Um,
Yep.
okay, hold on. Let me think my chain of thought. Okay, so, like, when you're talking about, like, skills and weapons interacting, I definitely think you're right. I think it would actually be a good idea for almost every, if not every, skill to be able to work with every weapon. But as a caveat to that, certain types of weapons are gonna more commonly, or maybe exclusively have, like, some, like, certain stat buffs that just kind of inherently make them better. So, like, if you had if with my example of, like, a turret, sure, you could do it with a sword or a hammer or even a staff, but maybe some of those things have like a stat on them that makes them inherently better or worse at like enabling that turret to do more or less damage. Or maybe if there is like a wrench type weapon type thing, that's going to inherently have a stat on it that makes the things that are themed towards that better. So if you wanted to go more purist with a build and make that build as effective as possible, you would maybe use specific types of weapons, because it would make sense that like a ground slam is going to be more effective with a big two-handed mace than it is with a sword, right?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but it might be cool to do it with the sword because you find some cool interaction where you ground slam into some other move that the sword is good at, and then you combine that with the modifier runes that you're using, and you get to create some kind of cool interaction out of it. So you're maybe using the sword ground slam as a setup to apply a big area debuff to some mobs around you, that you then go and use your second ability into to get like a big payoff from it. So I think that's probably how I would do it. I would have very few, if any, like exclusive skills that are exclusive to certain weapons, and would instead reward somehow with extra effectiveness, that when you partner the right skill with the right weapon type, that like you get more out of that. Do you
Yeah,
think that's yeah,
that's an approach they can take. I think they'd have to be careful with how they do it, because if it were just like a flat damage buff, you'd run into a stat stick situation where in some games, Warframe did have this, but they got rid of it and replaced it with something else. You'd have an ability that would scale off of like a specific weapon you had equipped,
hmm
but if that weapon isn't good at like crowd control and is only good at single target damage, except the ability is good at crowd control and single target damage, you don't even use the actual weapon, you're just equipping it for the stat buff. And I think if we end up in a stat stick situation, people will have like this staff that'll like do a whole bunch of it'll buff fireball damage, but they're not actually like they're not even a mage build. They're just they
yeah,
switch off to like sword and shield after that, and then it's like it's they can do that, but it's kind of a boring way to do it, you know?
yeah. Well, I think like one thing is like I don't think we're going to be equipping weapons per se. It's just going to be what's in your hand, maybe what's in your hand
Yeah.
at the time you use the ability. We'll be equipping armor, which may play into things like if you're a mage, maybe cloth based armor is going to kind of enable that mage build a little bit more. But I'm sure they could definitely find like
How I
a
would
good
do it
balance point for it.
is it would be like a case by case basis on how something would get buffed when you're using like the right weapon for it. But like if the let's say the if you use the ground slam with a mace, instead of it doing more damage, it has like a wider radius.
Yeah,
Or you do cast fireball with a staff in your hand, it leaves a burning after effect or something.
yeah. Or maybe it
Uh
explodes at the end and does like a little bit of splash damage or something.
yeah, if you summon a turret with a wrench in your hand, maybe it shoots faster, which technically does give it a damage boost just because of more DPS, or maybe it lasts longer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely think something like that can definitely work. I would like it to be not a universal damage, but like it maybe in some cases it can be damage, but in other cases it could be functionality to some extent. Because yeah, like I picture if you're doing a big ground slam with a sword, I mean that could still do a lot of damage to a target that you hit with it. But is that damage necessarily going to reverberate out to enemies in the area? Probably not anywhere near as much. So yeah, something like that I think could work. Um, Okay, Chase, I have a question for you. I think because I'd come up with a suggestion before and I got a little bit of kickback on it. So I'm kind of wondering what you think. How many let me phrase it this way. Do you think there is such thing as too many ability runes to a reasonable extent? I'm not saying like let's add in a million of them, but like should ability runes only be kind of confined to stuff that's like useful and like conventionally thought of as good? Or can the dev team have a little bit of like wiggle room to just add in some fun stuff just because it's fun, not because it's effective, but like they can add in, I don't know, I can shoot out butterflies at something and the butterflies attack, and it's not like the strongest spell, but it's just kind of funny or it's really cool or it's just different. Like, is there room for them to do an okay amount of that and it not take away from the effective side of things, or like, I don't know, maybe get too convoluted or confusing or something?
I mean, to be honest, the main problem with that would be PvP. And I will say, as someone who like this, like PvP is what video games is to me. But I also just love these types of games, just like playing survival and stuff. And I would never want to have to refrain from adding something because it affects a minority part of the game. And I think that obviously I'm pretty sure as much as Simon said that they want to try and like keep both of them, you know, on a similar playing field, I
Yeah.
think obviously PvE is more favored, which I'm completely fine with, and I would hope so, because that is majority of the game. But I think the problem with adding more, like if we were to essentially say that we could have like, I don't know, let's say instead of 2 modifier runes, we could have like 5, depending on how crazy the runes are, which honestly, even if they aren't crazy, like imagine, like, okay, let's just go off what we know. Like, what runes do we know about? We have the shock rune, the split rune. So like, let's just say, for example, like we put 5 split runes on a sword that has like, you know, a fireball ability.
Yeah.
Like, there comes to a point where it's just ridiculous. And I really do like those builds, but like there needs to be some sort of system in play for counteracting that. And I think what could work potentially, this is me spitballing, but like there could be subcategories of modifier runes where they are like categorized in the game by like usefulness in terms of
Ooh.
like okay, like not literally like, oh, here's a modifier in that you can find that like the description is categorized by fun, like obviously not necessarily like that, but like you would know which one is fun. Like internally there would be like a thing where it's like, you know, maybe the first 2 slots are like solely offensive, like you can only add 2 offensive slots, and then, you know, the rest are like, I don't know, like fun or something that doesn't like change the battle too dramatically, but it kind of just makes room for something cool like that. But like, I don't know, when you take Path of Exile, for example, like there's a lot of rune slots and your weapon can get pretty crazy, like really, really crazy. So it's hard to imagine something like that, even in Hytale alone for PvE, but especially PvP, like there needs to be a line that's drawn. And I think that there could be a solution by having like an internal, like, here's a modifier rune that like has a fun ability that's like more not as like crazy, and like it wouldn't be busted. I don't know. That's a super tricky thing to balance. That would be one of the hardest things that they would have to balance.
So
I
let
have a
me
possible
well,
balance suggestion.
well, hold on
Just,
one second,
just
because I think, because I want to kind of clear up what I meant a little bit, and but I do like the route this conversation is going. So we're going to kind of continue to feed off that. But what my question was more about like core skill runes, not modifier runes. So
Oh, okay, okay.
so everything would still have just the 2 modifier slots and take the same modifiers. But I'm talking about more core skills. Maybe I have a skill
Mm.
where I can summon a cow above somebody's head and it like falls on him and like starts kicking them or something. You know what I mean? Like something that could just be kind of dumb and silly. It's a core skill. You probably wouldn't use it in PvP combat, because in PvP combat it just wouldn't make sense to use. It wouldn't be as strong as your other skills, but maybe it fits a certain theme, or it has a certain like meme quality to it inside of Hytale, and it would just be something that is really just more added in because it's fun. It's funny to see. People could maybe use it as a challenge if they wanted to, like, hey, I'm gonna beat this entire crazy hard dungeon with the cow falling on the head ability, because it's just gonna be for the lulz. You know what I mean? Or whatever else they have that could kind of fit in that. Like, is there room in the game for some or a decent amount of those? Or would having too many of them in added into the game, like, would it confuse people? Like, would it be, oh man, there's too many options to pick. I don't know what this stupid cow thing is. Like, this is confusing. Or is it not that big of a deal and people can kind of easily pick out what's useful and what's not as they find it or craft it or whatever? That's more what I mean.
Okay, I see. Yeah. No, I really don't think there's a problem with that whatsoever. I honestly, don't quote me on this, but I would kind of be disappointed if there wasn't some fun stuff there. I mean, I think that would just be. I think that's just a huge opportunity. However, I don't think that that should be necessarily a priority until like 1.0 release, or and like maybe there could be like a chapter, like I don't know, obviously like we don't know how many chapters there are going to be, we don't know what type of themed updates we're going to get because we're only going off the goblin, but like if there was just an update that was just like, oh, here's a bunch of fun stuff, like here's a bunch of gadgets and stuff. I guess similar to the goblin stuff in terms of like the gadgets, but here's just a bunch of fun stuff that we're adding just for, whatever. And they just added like 15, skills that were just maybe not objectively the best, but are just goofy and silly. I think that would really match the charm of the game. Like I think it would just make sense. And I think it'd be kind of a huge missed opportunity if they didn't do something like that. I definitely think there's room as long as, I mean, again, we don't know how the rune forging system works as a whole, but I think like if you really wanted to, you could have those be ones that are crafted, and that way like when you're going around like looting and stuff and you just get your inventory filled of like, oh, here's the cow flinging rune, or here's the poop flinging rune, or whatever it is, like it doesn't, you're like, what, like that crafting system, it kind of has to ease into you like understanding. Like I think the progression of like finding stuff should be kind of simplistic, and then the rune forging system is where the complexity starts, and there could be more of an ease into it where that's where you craft all the fun stuff. So there's
Ooh.
definitely room for it.
Could be room for like Easter eggs with that too, right? Because like I'm gonna give an example and bring this to you, Brokenminifridge, so you can kind of answer too. Is like being able to throw poop in the game is just a funny hightail thing, right? It's kind of meme worthy on its own. How many games can you like literally like pick up poop that you find from the ground that a cow did and just like throw it at somebody? So like it could be a thing where like what if while rune crafting you learn how to craft a otherwise normal ability that like I don't know rains down like ice shards or something on somebody, right? Like think of something like an area of effect spell that like it casts a cloud above the head and like it rains something down and does damage. What if like in the process of crafting that, if this isn't told to you anywhere, you just have to kind of somebody figures it out, finds it out, and then it just becomes knowledge that you learn from others over time. Is like, what if you throw in like a piece of poop into that recipe, and there it is. Like now the raining cloud rains poop instead. Like, and that's just a funny like meme thing like that. And it's just something that's just player discovered via crafting because somebody had the bright idea to put poop in the recipe and found out like, oh wait, Hytale actually made this a thing. Broken mini fridge, your thoughts on not as useful but more fun skills being added in the game.
I'm all for them adding just whatever is fun or funny. I will say to answer your question about if I think people would be overwhelmed with the amount of stuff. It heavily depends on how they approach like just the entire system. Like if runes are physical items you need to like hold in your inventory to move them around, you have to store them in chests, and then or have them equipped in whatever slot they go in.
Mhm.
Um, then it could get overwhelming depending on how many there are. Um, I there's a better I think there's a better approach than having them be physical items that I'll talk about. But I don't think outside of the storage problem, I don't think people would get overwhelmed with there being a lot of them unless you literally just presented them with literally every single one at once and
Yeah.
then said, "All right, pick two." Um, but the way I think it would be best to implement the runes and abilities is sure they can be physical items but that you can find or maybe even craft and have in your inventory, but let's say you like consume it kind of like you do a recipe right now in game, and then you have like a slot in your inventory like the memory slots where that's just where your rune collection is, and
Okay.
then so you can't lose those. Once you unlock them, you unlock them.
Maybe. I do
Yeah,
think like
yeah.
hopefully anyways, like storage and hightail probably is not going to be a problem. It's kind of like playing right now. And we'll see if they have some like cool ideas to like add like make storage better with progression. But in a game where we're already storing probably like hundreds of chests worth of stuff by the time this game finally comes out and it has a full playthrough and all these different items and everything. I don't know that having like a double chest or two, like a couple double chests of runes will probably be a big deal, but I do think it'd probably be good for them to be maybe classified differently. Like, I don't know, like an acknowledgement of like, hey, like these aren't quite as serious. Therefore, the rune is like yellow instead of blue or pink instead of blue or something like that. Just maybe something to where like people get that visual, like really quick glance of like, oh, okay, these are my serious ones here. And these are the ones that are just kind of more like meme and funny. And then maybe also if you can only like craft them or something, then players like in full control of, I mean, if you don't want it, don't craft it. And if you do want it, do craft it.
I think he actually made a really good point. I honestly, I didn't think too hard about that, and that was one of the like I guess I subconsciously thought that that's how it would work, just because I'm used to Path of Exile, like it would be built into my inventory.
Yeah.
But I think that system could be really well, and the only thing that I would really change about it is that you would be able to like retract or convert that like once it's in your inventory, if it's not like a physical item anymore, it's just like an ability that you can change, you know, whenever you
Yeah.
want. Then the only thing I would change is just being able to convert that into a physical item in case you wanted to trade it to another player or something like that. But I think
Yeah.
it would be cool if like you
That
had
would
like
be
a
nice for
built-in,
servers.
yeah, like a built-in like almost not like close enough to like a bestiary, like so to speak, of like that's not the
Abilities.
right word, but yeah,
Collection.
yeah, collection where it just show like you can hover over the runes that you've collected and it gives you a brief description of like, oh, here's what it looks like, exactly like Path of Exile actually. Like when you hover over it, it shows like, oh, here's like a maybe a like a small brief video like that shows you like a 3 second like clip that just shows you what it does, so you kind of have an idea before you waste it or
Yeah.
attach it to a weapon.
Yeah, that could work.
So
Also, like I think it might depend on what they plan on doing with other parts of like the game and game modes and stuff. Because I think of something like a harder challenge mode. Like you know how we could like you can run the slider and make it to where you like lose everything when you die, or I think default is like you keep half of everything and you take a little bit of a durability loss. I can see that being a fun challenge mode in the future where like when you die, like you actually do drop all of your stuff. So there's like real stakes and maybe you just lose it all or something. And then like maybe your ability runes are part of that, as part of the challenge. So if they exist only as a physical item, um, then there would be even more stakes, I guess, versus it being more of an unlock. But I guess also, I don't know. There's a lot of ways you could do it. They could have it as its own separate like inventory in a way, because I know games that have done that too.
I mean,
Um,
we have that with the dude, I don't know how to say that word. Copiendium,
yeah,
whatever. How do you say that?
compendium.
Yeah, compendium. Like we have that with like it's essentially a bestiary. So if
Yeah,
like in the Forgotten Temple, so if we just had a built-in thing that I mean, actually, we kind of have it in our inventory as well, but it's just like a storage for our memories. But like if we had something built into
yeah,
our little menu like that just shows us like, hey, here's what it does. Like I think that would actually perfectly solve your concern about like possibly like over adding runes that like become too complicated,
yeah,
because if it just shows you it's like, oh, hey, this ability at like instead of having to base the ability in your mind off of like the title of the rune, you can kind of just read a brief description that just shows you like what it does. So I think that'd
yeah. I
be
like that for
something really
sure.
good.
Something like little things like that show you like what something is and what it does is I think is always good because the more experienced players, you know, they can just easily ignore it and it's not a big deal. But the like newer players who come to the game, like it helps them so much with like learning what stuff is and what it does, and it keeps people from getting overwhelmed. So I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah.
Here I want to keep things moving. And move on to this is something we talked about last time, and we haven't like there's been no segue into it in how we've talked today. So I'm just gonna bring it up, and that is boss abilities. So Brokenminifridge, how do you feel about like whatever kind of boss abilities that exist that we fight, maybe elites as well if they have special moves? Like we know the Feastmaster has like this like rage charge effect, and then there's a few different abilities or moves that um the goblin boss has. Do you think that it would be a good idea for them to make it so we can actually like those enemies can have maybe a rare chance to drop whatever special skills they have as a skill for us to be able to use, even if it's obviously we wouldn't want anything super powerful. Like if a boss has something that like it just insta kills everything in the room, obviously whatever we get shouldn't be that powerful because that wouldn't make sense. But a balanced version of that boss's skill for us to be able to use. How would you feel about that?
I I love when games do that, like Elden Ring and Dark Souls, for example. You kill the main bosses, and then you can either get their weapon or their armor. And then on top of that, I love making making and seeing themed builds, for like role playing purposes, or just to see how close you can get to like playing like one of the enemies in the game. So I love when enemies have exclusive like faction specific or just straight up enemy specific drops, and then you collect them all, and then suddenly you're looking and playing like said enemy.
Yeah. What do you think, Chaser?
Yeah, I come from a large Terraria background as well as Fridge.
Hmm.
So I think that I'm maybe this is I don't know how grindy they want to go with this game. I don't want it to be like a pain, but I also think that it grinding should have some sort of reward, and I think it would be super cool if there was a rare drop for certain things with these bosses, including a rune for them. I think it would be just super rewarding to continuously fight this boss. Maybe like each time you fight the boss, like if you're fighting it on a harder difficulty, like if you increase the challenge, then you have like better odds or something like that.
Yeah.
But I definitely think because Terraria has a system where basically you can only get unique items in a difficulty base. So like there's normal mode, there's expert, and there's master, and there are certain items that you can only get from killing a boss that drops in those respective modes. So I
Yeah.
think it'd be
Those
super
expert mode
cool.
items are great.
Yeah, that's true. I think that'd just be super rewarding for players. It adds that extra little excitement of like, oh, what am I gonna get from the boss? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that it's a little bit of a side conversation, but it kind of plays into itemization and what we're talking about a little bit is like having additional challenge for things that we've already done. And I think that'll be a good way for them to do that. It would be like I know ARPG games is where more of my experience is. Usually you have like a way to summon like crazy elite versions of like old bosses. And it's always fun because it helps keep old content relevant and fresh because maybe the goblin boss we can beat with like pretty easily with like end game gear or even like mid tier game gear. And it would suck for like what could be a really cool boss fight in the very end game once you're like full power to not be relevant anymore to make it relevant again by making it stronger. And then if we have something like ability runes or other like boss specific loot to like increase the drop chance of some of these things, maybe even significantly, whenever you fight that boss at its like ultimate difficulty could be a good way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think like I think the for itemization, I think it'd be very helpful for the game to have like a large loot pool for the boss. That way, it kind of feels more rewarding to go back and fight. Like I hope that I personally hope for itemization purposes and like that extra little effort. I think that the goblin boss when that inevitably comes out, like whatever it drops, I hope it's not a guaranteed drop. Maybe that's
Yeah.
just me.
No, I like
But
that.
like
I want to
um
have to refight it for some reason.
yeah, because it's just for me, I would hope that you wouldn't be able to go in a goblin area for one single session and then get everything you need and then never have an incentive to fight it again. So I think having the large loot pool for a boss is very beneficial for just the overall longevity of specifically that boss, you know?
Yeah, and I think if things are balanced good to where it's not like, "Oh my god, I have to have this boss skill rune," or like, "I'm not gonna be able to be effective with my character," and instead it's just like something that's kinda evenly like slots in with other skills in terms of how it's balanced or mean, maybe if it, I wouldn't even care too much if it's not as strong, but it's just like really cool to have. Um, it gives you that thing to chase and to get, and it's fun to have it. But on the other side of things, since it is a sandbox game, it's not like we're going to require this like player that just likes to pick crops and go fishing to go fight some ultimate version of the boss 8 times to like find this ability. Otherwise, they can't like, progress to the next phase of the game. It's like
Yeah.
kind of like have both sides of it. So everybody kind of fits in. And then also they could always put like cool cosmetic things too there because it's just cosmetics. It doesn't have a bearing on the game.
Yeah.
This is another one that came up somehow the last time we talked, and I think we should talk about it again. There was a concern about magic being overpowered in some way, and I think a lot of people will think that because good ranged attacks are sometimes really hard to deal with if you like to play melee. So whether that be um when you're playing in PvE and you're fighting bosses and a lot of characters. Obviously, if you could do so from a range versus being close up, you have a big benefit to that because you could kill the thing before it even gets to you, therefore making it easier. And if you go in and fight it face to face and it hits you, it's going to hurt a lot. And then also in PvP too, where if you can whittle somebody down to almost no health before another player before they even get to you, then they're not going to be that big of a problem when they do get to you, probably. Um, so how do you think we balance that out? I'll start with you, Broken Mini Fridge. How do we balance that out of like making something as cool as magic and fireballs and lightning and all this kind of stuff, not overpower and become meta versus using a good old sword and shield or a hammer or whatever?
Uh, I suppose the simplest way to do it is with a mana system of some sort, because if we don't know if runes specifically will take mana or if those will be on a cooldown, and we don't know if magic weapons down the line will have more variety of magic stuff going on outside of rune abilities.
Mhm.
Because right now the only almost fully implemented but not really magic items we have in exploration mode are the fire staff and frost staff,
Yep.
and those both have a melee and ranged, and I kind of like how the fire staff works. However, it's super expensive to use because you don't use magic right now. You use fire essence,
Mhm.
or I mean, you don't use mana right now. Um, so having to manage not only health and stamina but also mana at the same time is typically the easiest way to balance stuff like this. And then, if you want like more mana regen or higher total mana, you have to wear specific like mage clothing and stuff, which will have less defense than regular armor. So that's the simple, straightforward way to balance magic.
Um, Chayzur, I'm not sure if you had played what's the name of that server? Hold on, let me find it real quick. 'Cause I have a point I want to make in this. Uh, there it is. Darktail. Okay. So Chaser, I'm not sure if you played on the Darktail server or not before, but essentially they have like a weighting system, a weight system that goes along with armors. And I would think that like some type of system that they do with armor could definitely lead itself towards this, right? And essentially what that system does is the lighter weight the armor is, the less defense it gives you, but the more like mobile that you can be, run faster or movement abilities move you a little bit further or whatever, right? And I think in the case of like as we move to this rune system, maybe it can work in a similar way to where I don't know, like if you're going to go the path of a mage, your mage armor is lighter. It offers you less defense. So if something does get on you, you're probably going to be more likely to die. Maybe there could be a couple different versions of mage armor. Maybe there's something that is a little bit heavier that gives you less mobility and less mana, maybe. So you can go full glass cannon with a lot of mana and try to blast stuff down. But if it gets to you, you're done. Or you can go more hybrid where you have like leatherish type armor or something that's a little bit heavier, that still gives you some mana, but it also gives you more defense. So if something gets to you, maybe you have a backup like melee attack or something that you do, but you're not just insta dead because something gets to you. And then it could, phase all the way through the different like melee type of classes too, right? Like you have something that's more of like a rogue or an archer that where you wear lightweight stuff, maybe something more middle of the road for like a two-handed berserker type like class, or somebody that's going for like fast melee hits, fast damage, but not as much armor, all the way to like paladin with like full scale armor. You're not going to move very fast, but you are built like a tank, right? Do you think that systems like that can solve effectively, especially in PvP? I think is where this is probably going to matter a lot. Would a system like this kind of solve it? Is it too complicated? Do you have any ideas of something that would be maybe a better solution to balance ranged versus close up, and then high damage output versus defensive builds?
Um, well, I will say in terms of like heaviness, like weight classes of the armor, like me personally, maybe it's just because I'm heavy into movement. Like I really am against having movement reductions when you apply armor. I think a decent way to do this would be like let's say you are putting on a heavier armor. If anything, you just wouldn't there should never be a point where when you apply armor, you go below the base speed, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And I think the base default speed should never be tampered with in terms of like never go below it. But I think if you are a mage and you're, more squishy, like you have less HP, more mana, I think there could be a compromise of like, okay, here, but you get slightly more speed, never below, but like, again, for an archer, another thing, like, it's we just go back to archetypes. It's like, what do you value more? Like, if archer ends to be like, if the class of archer is supposed to be long range, I'm actively trying not to get hit, then by default, the archer should have a large amount of DPS, but they're just not as tanky. They have significantly less health than they would if they chose a normal armor. And by not choosing the archer respective gear, you're losing out on a lot of damage potential. So another thing you could do is like give the archer speed. So like there are definitely trade-offs to the class that you're picking. But the only thing I would say is just never go below the base speed, because it just makes for I don't know. It's just that could, like, when we start removing speed, that could also greatly affect the exploration part of the game. And I think only adding speed, not like significantly, but I think that slight buff would benefit the classes that maybe that would fit that archetype. That would make sense,
Maybe if such a system were to exist, it would more affect like the movement within abilities that are used. Maybe so like if you are like, let's say a rogue does have like a backstab ability, or even like some other type of like dash ability where like they jump in and like they do damage to a target from a distance. Maybe like if somebody uses that rogue intended ability and they have plate mail on that's heavy, like they can't like traverse as large of a distance with that skill to land it and hit it as they would if they had like leather armor on, for example. Maybe it would kind of work like that. Or maybe there's movement, like we don't like abilities don't even have to be necessarily attack. They could be defensive abilities. They could even be movement abilities. Maybe as an archer, you have like this like extra large like jump that you can do. It's an ability that like helps you get the high ground or reposition as an archer or a rogue. So it's like a quick move. We know that well, I guess we don't know, but another example could be like teleportation as a magic user or something. Maybe armor could have some type of bearing on that too, to where you have to take the risk of having lower tier armor on to get the benefit of uh the full benefit out of movement based abilities or movement based attacks.
Yeah. I mean, that I would hope that the armor is what really allows the player to lean into their given archetype. I think that would just make sense. Like, if like example, we could do full set bonuses where it's like if I have a full set bonus of like the archer, I gain a certain amount of speed.
Yeah.
And that's just the benefit of like, the game knows that like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. Because obviously you wouldn't really benefit, you wouldn't seek the full benefit of having like, let's say if archer armor gives you speed, but then like I'm trying to kind of cheese it by using the speed, but then my weapon is like a close-up sword. Well, it's not really going to work that way, because if you don't have that defense when you're playing that close up, then you're going to be at high risk, right?
Yeah.
Because, obviously the archer armor is meant for the speed and low defense, because you're not ever supposed to be close up. So I think that would really help with the archetype.
Okay.
If I could put in my
Yeah.
input here, I agree with Chayzur's first statement. I mean, I agree with most of what he says, but specifically his first statement of don't reduce the default speed.
Yeah, I agree,
If
by
you
the way.
do make it very, very minuscule, I think in Skyrim, technically heavy armor does make you slower. However, most people default to heavy armor unless they're doing a stealth archer. So that then feels like the default, but it's still not that noticeable until you like have played hours in heavy armor and then switch to no armor at all, and then you're like, oh, I feel a little bit faster. But for the most part, if there's something I've observed from playing all sorts of different kinds of games, players hate moving slow and will do literally anything to move just slightly faster.
Which is
And we
why we
got
have the problem that we have today with the daggers.
yeah, we got
And
the dagger hopping. Minecraft has sprint jumping. In Destiny 2 specifically, and this is also relevant for like refighting bosses. When players are doing a raid or a dungeon that they've done before, when they're not like in a specific encounter of the dungeon, some people hate being slow so much they will switch to a completely different loadout specifically designed to move as fast as possible to the
yeah,
next
and that's
area.
annoying to have to do, really. Maybe it's something they could tie to like in combat or something too. I don't know, to where like when your flagged is in combat, like you hit an enemy slash an enemy hits you, and within a couple seconds of that, like maybe any kind of like speed differences would only take effect then. Because I do think you definitely want to avoid, no matter what you do, no matter how these skills work, no matter what the gear does. I think you definitely want to avoid there being a generic movement meta equivalent to what we have with daggers now, to where people just generally feel like, okay, well, for me to move, I have to equip everything like I'm a rogue, because it just gets me around the world faster. And I don't really care about anything else. I just want to get around the world fast. Therefore, 75% of the player base plays rogue, because plays in a rogue like play style slash equipment, because it just helps them move around the world better. So I think whatever they do with the skill runes, with the equipment, etc., they have to make sure that's not a thing. Because if it is, it's annoying, because that's what we'll all do, is we'll pick whatever moves us around the world the fastest and also allows us to kill stuff.
They have to also have to be super, super careful with that, because if the rogue class, so to speak, isn't movement based at all, then it's going to
Then why go
completely.
rogue?
Yeah, exactly. But so I think this problem mainly stems from the fact that there's like the only movement that we know of is just weapon based movement, and there's no
Yeah,
other like
true.
alternative. So I think like once we have like, you know, suitable ways to get around the world,
If I'm riding
then
on a
I don't.
horse and that's faster than anything that any class can do, and that's the best way to get around when you're like traveling by land, then it doesn't matter anymore,
Right.
probably.
Yes, exactly.
I guess the only time it
In
matters.
Destiny, there is a grappling hook ability
Mhm,
for a specific subclass type,
yeah.
and every single class can use the grappling hook. And not only can they use it, but it's technically also it's a grenade and a melee.
Mhm.
So it is effective in combat. But then the hunter, which is supposed to be the movement class, although they're technically the slowest because of some stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. They have an aspect specifically for them to give them a second grappling hook charge at all
Ooh.
times. And then
Um,
they can also make like grappling points in air that other people can grapple onto as well. So, and that's ability based movement right there.
Yeah, I guess maybe they'll like avoid a lot of this if the movement perks that you get from the different like class archetypes that we try to play are not as good as the item based movement and NPC whatever other base movement that we have. If I take a horse everywhere I go or whatever, and that's easy enough to keep track of, well then I don't need it for traveling long distances. If I'm inside of some type of dungeon, castle, something, if I have a grappling hook or something that I can use for vertical movement, or if the skills generally just aren't that great for vertical movement, and there's no meta that evolves there outside of something that anybody could just take and use. We saw like the rocket boots for like a double jump. So if that's available to everybody to be able to use, then you won't have to worry as much about, well, I could technically jump further as a rogue. That won't matter as much if everybody can just get the double jumping rocket boots to use whenever they know they're doing this like that sort of activity. I think stuff like that'll probably squash most of it. I just definitely hope that that's something they're probably paying attention to, so we don't end up with a meta where everybody just plays the same class because it gets around better.
Yeah, that's just I feel like most of that problem just stems from the lack of movement in the game in general right now. I think as we
Yeah.
get like more movement stuff, as we get like I don't know better horses, as we or whatever it is, like I just they got to be careful nerfing and limiting the mobility based classes for that exact reason. So I think that more of a solution to that is to just add more common and more accessible movement methods just in general for around the world, not even combat related.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to a fun question I have for you guys. Chayzur, we'll start with you. Is there any specific ability runes that you would like to see? Is there like something that you could think of where it's an ability that you like feel like you have to see in the game because it would just be so cool and so fun for you to use?
I just want to really lean into the lightning stuff for reasons that no one will ever know. It's a very hidden secret of mine, but no, I just love lightning stuff. So I think it'd be super cool to have like just a general like a smite ability where it's just like I can just call down a lightning bolt like from the sky and it just like maybe kind of like the channeling enchantment on the trident in Minecraft. It just like calls down a lightning bolt and it just does a lot of damage and it just like ignites them, maybe sets them on fire for a brief period of time. I think that'd just be cool. I don't know. I really like the cool stuff. Anything cool with like elements like lightning, like I'm just all for. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind.
And so when it comes to lightning, do you lean more of like, I don't know, like Thor/Odin, like give me melee weapons infused with lightning type abilities, or do you lean more like magic user, like let me cast a chain lightning
Unlimited
bolt that like
power.
goes across, yeah, like, or do you want to like chain lightning bolt or strike like everything is a mage? Like which way do you lean on that, or more paladin, like super tanky, like holy bolt lightning type build? Like what do you think?
I'm just the type of person to maximize my speed in every game. Like I'm just maybe it's the ADD, but like I just love going as fast as I possibly can. So I think it'd be cool if like maybe there like I could attach like a lightning based ability to like my daggers or something and it just like supercharges them with like electricity that makes me swing faster and I can just like bolt in like it's like more of the classic rogue type. That's why I love the daggers because they are
Yeah,
just movement based
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
just like I think it's
Yeah.
cool for me to just like zip in, do a like
In and out of
huge chunk of
combat.
damage, and then zip out. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
like that's my stuff. But I also love the chain lightning stuff. Like I think if I'm playing with other people, I would definitely opt into being the crowd control type of thing because I just love seeing the lightning just like chained to everything. That's why that example would just like lit me up because it was just like it'd be super cool if I had a buddy who was just entirely water based and they just that's just their thing and they love it so much and it'd just be super like amazing that I could pair with them, and that's just lightning. It would just make a devastating combo, and I think that's what I'm like super into. So yeah, I'm it's a my playstyle differs depending on like if I'm solo or with another person, but yeah.
Yeah, and also I had a point and I lost it. Yeah, let's just go. Let me move to you, Brokenminifridge. Of special ability runes, a specific ability rune that you would like to see. Like what's the super cool ultra thing that like if you see that they add that to the game, your like jaw just hits the ground and you're just so happy.
Well, I wouldn't say that would be my reaction to like anything they add ability wise, because that's not how I react to things. But I mean, like Chayzur, I do like to have a theme to my stuff. I'm an ice guy. But outside of ice stuff, I'd love a short range teleport, and I mean like short, like 5 to 10 blocks with a cooldown for balance, of course.
Yeah.
Mostly for PvE combat, for dodging like boss attacks and stuff. Of course, it'd be abused in PvP, I'm sure. But
Yes, it would.
it would
If it has a
be
big mana cost, though, I mean, it could be risky to use.
I will be the one abusing it. Yes, you're talking to him.
But yeah, you never know, right? They could introduce something like that, and there's always good ways to balance it. If it costs a lot of mana to where you teleport, you're out of danger, but you don't really have any mana left and you're just doing basic attacks, and then, you do that against the wrong person, they can get to you and kill you before you can, like, do something else. There's always good ways to balance it, I think.
Fridge, you're so what like how would you use that, you think? Like you're referring to like PvE? Like are you using that for like a fight or are you using that just for general like movement?
I mean, it could be either. Of
Yeah.
course, you could give it like some combat
Mm.
stuff. For example, I suggest a short range teleport because Destiny 2 has this, and by itself, that's all it is, and it's not even like a teleport. It's you kind of just turn invisible, and like quickly move from
Mm.
from A to B, and it is very a short range teleport. You're not like going across half of the area. Um, but you can also equip a fragment that, or no, an aspect that when you use that dodge, there's also like a burst of ice around you
Yeah.
that slows nearby
Ooh.
enemies as well.
That sounds fun. Cause then let's say you have let's say you make a magic based class here in Hytale, right? You go that route. And you have teleport and then, whatever your other ability is. Like whenever the enemies close in on you and you're that glass cannon build, even if you use most of your mana, you could teleport away to safety and at the same time slow slash root in place the enemies that were like about to hit you. And now you've bought yourself time to like, okay, now I can like kind of reposition. I can drink a mana potion or let my mana regen or something. And then you can kind of go at them again. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, movement
Um,
movement is the way.
Yeah, movement is the way, but at the same time, like we talked about earlier, not making it meta for normal
Yeah.
everyday movement, but movement in combat, I think,
Yes, for
is
sure.
very fun. So if they could find a good way to separate those things, give us cool movement in combat, and have a way to prevent us from abusing it out of combat to where we're just spamming movement abilities or spells everywhere. They
Well,
find
The
a way
way
to
they
do that, it'll be awesome.
the way they balance that in Destiny is when you have this teleport, it replaces your regular dodge ability that the Hunter class has. And not only that, but the your dodge cooldown does not start regenerating until a buff that the teleport gives you wears off. So it's an even longer cooldown than the regular dodge.
Mm, okay. Here we didn't talk about this yet, and it's something we need to discuss, and that is, I think we kind of hinted to it here just a second ago. It's the elemental interactions. I want to get your opinions on that. Let me get switched over to the scene here. So we have the screenshot right here, that came in with the blog post, and just to describe it to people, somebody's listening and not looking on screen. Um, in the first frame, they show just like the normal ability of being able to attach a modifier rune to an attack. So you have a hammer slam on the top, and then on the bottom it's an electrified hammer slam. So they've attached a rune, a modifier rune that does that to their hammer. And in slide number 2, there's the player is casting a water spell. They have a big mace in their hand, and they're casting a water spell on an enemy and getting them wet. And then they do that hammer slam down on them with the electric modifier rune, and it does extra shocking to them. Like it looks like it's doing what would be additional damage because they're electrifying a wet enemy. In the third slide, there's 2 players. On the top slide, one player is casting like a windy tornado spell, and then a second player that's playing with them casts a fire spell into the tornado spell, and it makes it into a fire tornado. And then the fourth slide shows that this can also have interactions with the general environment. So they're in an environment where it's raining outside. There's a group of skeletons. All the skeletons are wet because they're in the rain. A hammer slam is done down on top of one skeleton. And because everybody's wet, it arcs between all of the different skeletons, doing damage to all of them. So I'm just going to start out by saying before I throw this to Chayzur is I did not expect to have a system in the game like this. I didn't think we would go this far. I thought something like skill runes would maybe be possible, right? But I didn't think we would go to this level of I want to say I'm going to use the word complexity, but I don't mean complexity as in like it's just hard for players to grasp and understand, but more like there's these like multi-level depth interactions that can occur. Chayzur, how do you feel about this? Is this something that you thought we would ever see in Hytale? And how well do you think this fits in the game, especially for PvP? Like I can imagine some like group PvP scenarios where stuff like this goes crazy.
Yeah, honestly, like right before you said that, I was thinking in my head, like I could not have ever expected something like this. I think a large part of it is because like we are so used to what Hytale is right now, and we've just gotten so used to the game. And I think one thing that someone pointed out to me recently is that like with this new update, with like the textures and like the things that they're adding, the game kind
Yeah.
of feels more fantasy like again. And I think it's because that we have gotten so used to Hytale, and you know, like to to be a little bit harsh, like it's pretty empty right now. So I think there's not a ton of fantasy elements in the game right now, just because like all of them pretty much like didn't make the cut. So I think with the introduction to a real like magic system and these like other fantasy elements of like, oh my god, like the world is actually like interacting with like how I play the game entirely. It's I think it was shocking to a lot of us because like I said, we just got used to the sandbox feel of Hytale. And I think not only is it supposed to be sandbox, but it's more adventure and fantasy focused. And I think for a lot of people, it didn't feel super fantasy for us anymore. So I
Yeah.
think this update was kind of like it's like a shock, pun intended, but like it's actually it truly is like very very I don't know, like I could not have ever imagined they were gonna do it like a that type of world interaction type of system. However, like Hytale's always been super deep into that immersion aspect of like how they wanted animals to be like, you know, super interactive, like a bear returning to its den or something like that. So
Yeah.
maybe in some world I could have seen it, but definitely not this one. It's crazy, and I think PvP is going to be super super interesting with this, especially because I brought this up before, but someone brought up to me in one of my comments. They said if one person decides to use if players can interact with each other in the world itself, if one player decides to shoot a fireball, or like a water spell. Let's say water spell. Let's say one person decides to use a water spell towards someone, and then the other person decides to throw like a lightning bolt or whatever it is, like a lightning based attack. Where does that attack get redirected to? Like who accepts the fate of that attack? Or probably a better example is someone using a fireball and someone else using a wind attack or like a wind tornado. Like where does that attack end up? Who gets that attack? So I think that's kind of my biggest question, and I think that could directly play into PvP because if we're using element-based PvP, then like, and you don't know the other person's build, you might accidentally cause like some catastrophic event that might actually
I have an
really
example
hurt you.
actually for PvP. Let's imagine you're PvP against somebody. You're a mage, they're an archer. You fire a fireball at them. At the same time, they're shooting an arrow at you. The arrow passes through the fireball. And now, because of you casting that fireball, you've now set yourself on fire because their arrow passed through it. How
Yeah,
crazy is that?
I
What if
think that, yeah.
what if you shoot an arrow into a tornado and like it just goes somewhere random and like hits somebody unexpectedly? There's so many crazy interactions that I can think of that could technically exist.
I also think it would be fun to watch from a distance. It'd be like an anime battle of different moves like clashing with each other and affecting each other.
Yeah. Um, and here, one more question before I take it to mini fridge fully here is does this change anything about what you think you would find fun in PvP and Hytale? And what I mean by that is maybe before, and I don't know if you are or not, but maybe before you typically like more enjoy like 1v1 style combat, every man for himself style combat, where it's not like a group or anything. It's just kind of like an arena, you're running around, everybody's kind of fragging each other. Would something like this change it to where all of a sudden you're like, man, actually playing like two-man teams or three-man teams or something. That actually sounds even more fun now because I can get together with my teammate and like we can devise some like wicked stuff that like is just gonna like wreak havoc. Like, does it change potentially what you find fun in PvP when you have like interactions like this?
I think it kind of depends on how balanced they are, like in the beginning. Because, like, I will say it would bother me if I'm in a fight against someone and there's a second person involved and I stand zero chance against a second person. But I think that the fact that our attacks like kind of combine would actually give the solo player more of an edge because that would mean that the duo attack could severely backfire if if they're both using a certain element and like or like if they're both using two different elements specifically for that duo build and I choose another element that perfectly like kind of redirects the attack to where they both suffer the blow, then that would be super cool just to allow like I said, it depends on how overpowered these runes are. Because if you have two crazy runes against one dude, then I feel like the opportunity for one guy, no matter how good he is, to kind of win that fight would be slim. But like I said, with the interactions, there could be a lot of the turns of the battle could be a lot more often. But I definitely think it'd probably be more fun for sure, no contest, to fight with another person beside you because like it just unlocks the insane amount of opportunities for builds that you can do.
Yeah.
Like the full potential of a lightning build would be is really only possible with someone who is using an entirely based water build, so you don't have to rely on the rain and stuff like that.
I wonder if they'll
So
go crazy with it too, where can I like cast a wind tornado and then like somebody on my like a rogue based player on my team just like legit just like jump into it and it like catapult them at like Mach 5 speed into the enemy? Like crazy interactions like that are
mhm,
possible. It's gonna be wild.
yeah,
Um
I think SMP content's gonna be crazy with
yes,
this.
absolutely. Broken mini fridge. Were you because I'll say this to you. Me, I come from a Minecraft background, right? That's like I'm like traditional blocky sandbox game, and I'm mostly a vanilla player. Like I don't really play too many mods. I'm a fan of like playing the vanilla way for the most part. So when I saw something like this, which I have played Path of Exile 2, this does exist there. Never in a million years would I have thought that combat in the game would go as far as having interactions between different skills or different elements or different things that are happening in the world. What do you how do you feel about it? And then was it something that was kind of surprising to you to see that we're getting this level of detail and combat in the game?
I wouldn't say I was like shocked to see this, but I was pleasantly surprised, especially at like I don't think we're getting this immediately, but they're working on it.
Yeah.
Because it's not the first game to do this. I mean, even Skyrim, which is like 15 years old now or something, does it to an extent. Not fully to this level, but like there's dungeons with like oil leaking on the ground from lanterns, and then you can set that oil on fire and it'll burn any enemies standing in it. A more recent example is Baldur's Gate 3, which is based on the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm not sure if this is something specifically in Dungeons and Dragons or if it's just something that DMs are like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll allow it." But in Baldur's Gate, if you use electric attacks on like enemies that are I don't know if them being wet does anything, but if they're standing in a puddle of water, if you attack the water, every single enemy that's standing in it will get electrified. So
Yeah,
it's not unheard of to see in games, but I was not expecting it this early on in Hytale's lifespan.
yeah,
For a
definitely me
voxel
either.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Um, so kind of shifting from there. Now that we've covered like all these things going to affect how combat changes. Um, and we have some parts of combat that exist now that we don't really know what's going to happen with them. So for example, we have hold left click to do a charged, I call it a charged attack. I don't know if that's the proper term, but you hold down your left click and it does a charged type attack that's dependent on that particular weapon. Um, my question for you guys is, does that still have a place in the game with the skill system? And if it does, do you think that it should be like, should they use that as another way to incorporate some customization in your builds? Should you be able to, maybe you can't change the skill that the hold left click does, but maybe you could still add modifier runes to it. And then I'll also apply the same thing to whatever they end up doing with the Q ability, whether it's a ultimate attack or it's just an additional move like we talked about earlier. Should you be able to, at the very minimum, be able to add modifiers to that, or does that go too far? Chayzur, what are your thoughts? Should this still be in the game? Should we be able to modify if it does stay in the game? Should they take it out? Like, what do you think? And then how do you think that plays with the Q ability, being able to modify that or not?
I definitely should stay in the game, especially because if we end up, I mean, once the capital comes out and we have like mini games and stuff, I imagine it would be absolute hell to balance, like, like Skywars, for example, with runes. So I would imagine they would just not use them at all,
Mm.
or just use a set, or use like everyone
Set
has like
ones. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah, it's ingrained on the weapon or the player. So, and I think like if they just didn't use runes, then I think the charged attack is kind of just necessary for like, overall stuff. I don't think there's a world where they should ever get rid of it just because it just adds that extra layer of like, this is what makes the weapon special. I mean, of course, the click, the M1 for all the weapons is like, you could argue that that's like what makes the weapon special, but I'd say like the charge attack is kind
Yeah.
of just like the bread and butter of each weapon. And I think by removing it and kind of leaning more into the element stuff, we kind of start straying away from like the weapon personality. Because I think if anything, choosing the weapon you want to use based off of the weapon itself and just not like, oh, what you like, or like its damage factors. Like I think those charge, like each weapon has its own personality. So I think
Yeah.
the more customization, the better. So I think, I definitely think that we should be able to modify the charge attack. Like maybe not like you said, not the attack itself, but like what it does. Like if
Modifier
I could
runes.
add, yeah, like if you could add like a debuff effect on specifically that charge, I think it's just like the more customization and personalization, the better. Like I don't think I don't think there's gonna be any complaints there. As for the special ability, it also depends on what they want to do with modifiers. Like, we have no idea what that means or does. And then, you have modifiers and enchant. So it's like, you know, how crazy do we want to go? Um, we honestly, the main thing we have to look at is how crazy combat is going to be like when we get these first 6 runes. Like how crazy is it going to be compared to what it normally is? And then you have
Yeah.
to think like, oh, in the future, like we're going to have enchantments and modifiers on top of that. So it's like, at what level is it too much?
Yeah.
Which is like, that's why, by changing the signature, I definitely think there needs to be something changed with the signature for sure, because it's undoubtedly going to get overshadowed by the runes. Like there's just no doubt in my mind about that. So I don't know exactly what they could do about that. I think yeah, being able to change them would be cool, but there needs to be something changed with them for sure.
Um, Before we take it over to Broken Mini Fridge, so kind of where you're sitting is the left click, the hold left click, maybe the signature ability as well. Those are the things that are like this is what makes this weapon special. Versus the runes are these are ways I can take my weapon and make it more effective, but the runes are very universal. You can use them on anything. So if we didn't have something that made the weapon special, then at that point, what's the difference? What weapon you use? It actually would kind of make things more boring. But you do think that being able to add modifier runes, at least to like the charged left click attack, would be a good idea. Um, do you think having like so we have like these like universal skill runes, right? That we'll be able to use and it can apply to anything. Do you think there's also a place for like weapon specific skill runes that replace that like Q button, that special ability attack now? Like is there room for a second classification, like a second category of rune that's specific to the weapons on top of the more broad general runes?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like I said, the more personalization, the better. You know, depends on, like I said, depends on how crazy you want to get. I mean, if and like the direction that they want to take the signature attack, like what is the role? Like now we're kind of in a territory where, like with the introduction of runes, we don't really understand the role of the signature attack because it's like, I mean, if anything, the most obvious answer would be for bosses because, like I said, like the signature charge is so slow, especially with the introduction of runes. Like, we're probably going to be able to kill and drop an enemy very quickly.
Yeah.
Like, if I could use one ability and just instantly kill a skeleton, there's no world where I'm being able, like, I will be able to use the signature attack because it's just like they're dropped instantly. So I
Yeah.
think the system itself of like switching weapons and like keeping the charge a little and like deteriorating, like that would in this situation it'd probably be a must or at least something similar. But I definitely think that there's room for more signature abilities depending on how crazy they want to get with it, because if they are specifically targeted towards enemies that have more HP, then you know I think that like we went back to earlier, I think we just need to have something a little bit more spicy for a so-called like special ability. Like when I think of
Yeah.
special ability, I think of something that like, oh hey, this is taking me time to build up and it's going to be worth the payoff and it's going to look, you know, cool and it's going to do a big chunk of damage. But now it's like our base weapon itself is already insane, and then when you just use the signature, it's just like, okay, here's just like a damaging jab. So I think regardless, there needs to be something that is changed in that system for sure. But everything else, yeah, like I think just more personalization, the better. There's definitely room for it.
And how about you, mini fridge? So, if we're keeping, I'm assuming that's probably what you're going to say. Definitely want to keep the left click. If you don't, you can tell me. But do we just keep it as a like how it is now? It's just an additional move that's for the like that specific weapon, or do you allow it to be a little bit more with allowing like modifier runes or something to go onto it? And then I know your idea was that the special ability would maybe be like a special move that's on cooldown or something for like that weapon. So it's a weapon specific ability. Do you do you keep it as only that, or do you allow there to be two, three, four, five options? Like not a ton, but like a few options that are like this is a mace skill rune. And then like your mace can have as its core ability a couple of different things you can do. Like, what do you think?
Well, I would keep the charge attack. If anything, I'd buff it right now just because of how PvE combat works. Because in most games with a combat system, melee combat system similar to Hytale, if you hit an enemy that's blocking with a charge attack, it'll break their block.
Yeah. Yep.
That does not happen in Hytale right
No,
now.
it
They
doesn't.
just tank it. And I don't even think they have stamina. So I'd at least give the enemies their own hidden stamina bar. And ideally, hitting them with a fully charged attack would also break their block, at least temporarily.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if it like broke their shield, if it was like a wooden shield or something.
Yeah.
As for changing signatures of a specific weapon, it would depend on like how many there are. It could work as long as they're like similar in balance.
Yeah.
But before you suggested like just having a few for a specific weapon type, I was gonna suggest make it so that this one weapon type just has that signature ability, but for like legendary or mythic rarity weapons. And there's only like this one specific type, there's this one specific sword with this specific name, and that has its own unique
Ooh,
ability.
that's kind of a cool idea. I like that because it gives that gear something special. Although
Yeah.
I would worry a little bit if would that also create like a meta of some sort to where it's like, yeah, well, if you're gonna run a sword, obviously you're only going to run this
I wouldn't
specific
make it
sword.
like just like objectively stronger. I'd make it different in some way.
Yeah. What about if you find, I don't know, and maybe it defeats your purpose of it. What if like when you find that sword, you have the ability to like extract that special ability out of it and then put it on a different same class weapon, like a different sword if you wanted to.
You That could work, but my idea with like these unique weapons is they'd be tied to like specific bosses or like the final reward of like a quest line or something,
Yeah.
or like tied to a specific character. So that's not John with his iron sword, that's John with John's sword.
Yeah. Okay. Um so moving from there, this is kind of stems from something Chayzur said, and it's just kind of something that how combat works in general. Do you do you think that the ways that we know the runes work, skill runes work now, and some of the things we kind of assume on top of it, like we talked a little bit about um certain skills would maybe work better on certain weapons, like a big hammer slam is really going to be more effective on a hammer than it would be on a sword, but you can still use it on a sword. Or casting a fireball is going to be more effective with a staff than it is an axe, for example. So knowing that like skills will probably at the very least have weapon types that they're better on than other weapon types. Do you think that this will sufficiently reduce people's need and desire and want and effectiveness of carrying a lot of different weapons? Like, do you think in this rune system right now, Chayzur, that it will likely make it to where you don't feel like you need to carry 4, 5 different weapons in PvP combat to have a leg up over your opponent? Or do you think that more would probably need to be done to do that? Or do you not even want that to like, do you prefer it to be the meta where you have to carry like a hotbar full of weapons and whoever can swap between them better is the one that wins? Like what is your preference there? How do you think it's working out so far?
I've had several conversations about this, and I've thought a lot about this. You know, I'm sure you might know, like the current PvP meta with how the game stands is weapon swapping.
Mhm.
Because you know you can just do a lot of different moves. For example, the axe does the most damage, so you basically before you get in a fight, you kind of swing it twice, and then you go into the fight swinging the third attack because it does significantly more damage than the other two, which is like the most damage you can get in one single hit, aside from the
Mhm.
charged daggers. And you know, then like in the middle of the fight, I can just instantly swap to my sword because it's an instant slash. I can instantly swap to my sword, slash, and then swap right back. So you know, that's the way it is right now. And look, I know a lot of people are going to be upset if they, you know, if they use this meta, like after I say this, but I I really do not like weapon swapping for this type of game. I think it's just super immersion breaking, and I think a large part of it could stem from the fact that there is no real cooldown, or you know, there's no pull out animation when you switch, so you can't even tell when someone's going to do that. And I think that that's just not really an intuitive combat system. I think it's just kind of you know, it's the player taking advantage of being able to instantly swap. And I think that, you know, that's fine if it's in the game, but I think that, you know, with the rune system, I think that no matter what, there will always be a player in this game, and there will always be a group of people in this game who will weapon swap. And I think it's going to be borderline impossible to fix that problem because you have to draw a line between fun and this is just bad for the game. And I think with the rune system, you know, if you have let's say like the axe is like still the most powerful weapon, and you add just this crazy, you have just this pure damage build with the axe, but then the daggers still have these movement or this movement option. Regardless of the runes, like there always will be a scenario where a weapon is just objectively better to use in that situation. So I don't think that anyone is going to not take the opportunity to hold another weapon, regardless of the rune stuff. I think that like if this were to be a problem that were to be fixed, it has nothing to do with runes, and it'd have to be a more fundamental change of like here adding a cooldown between swapping through weapons. That's like a whole nother conversation that's not really rune related. So I really think that like no matter what, I think the only thing that this really, really changes is that this will give the players who want to use one weapon specifically over the four, like how it is right now,
Yeah.
this will give them a significantly higher chance of winning that fight.
Okay, so it bridges the gap.
Yes, I think so.
Because I can say that's one of the things that like I like PvP combat, but I get annoyed by combat that requires a high APM, both because I maybe I could train myself to do it to some extent, not to the extent that some of the best players do it, but like I could do it to some extent and be like semi-effective with it. But I just find it annoying. Like I don't want to have to do it. If I have a sword, I want to fight with the sword, and if the other player has the mace, I want them to fight with the mace, and then through other skill expressive means, do we figure out who wins? Positioning, strategy, what we're equipped with, and how we utilize those things. Um, aim to an extent to make sure you land every hit. If you miss a couple hits, if you miss a couple swings when you're swinging and the other person doesn't, like stuff like that, I like when those types of things decide a battle, not who can spam their mouse and keyboard buttons faster to like eke out like those extra percentage points of effectiveness to win. So, just a last question for you before I go over to Brokenminifridge is do you think that they should go like if you were advising to what you think would be the most fun and balanced, generally speaking, for the broader Hytale audience, do you think it would be better for them to put in, let's say, a short half second, 1 second, whatever animation when it comes to putting away and pulling out weapons? Maybe even to the extent of like smaller weapons you can like pull out and put away quicker than like bigger weapons. So like if you wanted a weapon swap from like say a one-handed sword to daggers, wouldn't take as long as weapon swapping from a big two-handed mace to a big two-handed axe or to like a sword and shield. Like do you think that would be good for them to do at this point or no?
Yeah, so I think right now the way the game stands today, no, but I think when the rune system gets there and it becomes more obvious of like what it's trying to be, then I think that's an absolute must.
Okay.
Because I will tell you that like as the game continues to grow and people find out how the combat system works, I personally have been like learning the weapon swapping stuff for like a few months now, and I really like how it is in the game right now, but it's because of it's a band-aid fix it should never be like the intentional way of fighting. And the thing is, I'll make it clear that I don't want to permanently remove weapon swapping, because that would mean that we're taking away a play style that players genuinely enjoy. I think there should be opportunities for a player to weapon swap, but it should never be the objective, like best thing to do. There should always be, and also another thing is like like I said before, it's going to be a borderline impossible thing to completely remove. But my exact like concept of this would be exactly what you said. There would be a half-second cooldown between switching from a fast weapon and then you maybe a 0.75 cooldown and switching through a heavy weapon, just because that gives the opposing player, the time to react to what's about to happen. And I
Yeah.
think that way, by having the cooldown, not only does it add immersion to the game, I also think, a side note, I think that the player should physically show the weapon that they like. If a player is carrying a sword in their inventory, it should show a sword on their hilt.
That's cool.
Sword on their hilt. and a battle axe on their back or whatever, just so that the opposing player can kind of understand like where where the fight's going to end up. And I think that the cooldown is something that it's like, okay, this is more balanced. Like I can see what's going to happen and I can react in time. It's not an impossible situation. And at the same time, it does not permanently remove the weapon swapping meta. So I think the cooldown is like, even if it's super slight, I'm not talking like a 5-second cooldown, I'm talking like not a visual cooldown, like an actual animation that just, you
Yeah.
just can't attack while you're pulling it out. I think it just makes sense. And yeah, I think weapon swapping will never be removed, and I frankly don't think it should be, but I'm very against it being the number one thing. But I will say the reason that weapon swapping is so popular is because that players like swapping between 4 keys at once, it is a skill expression. So they like the challenge of like, hey, I'm getting better at this. So some people might not enjoy the rune system because that it's like down to point and click, and it's like about your intelligence of like what build you want, right? So I think that the weapon swapping can offer, with the balancing of it, can offer a perfect skill expression opportunity and incorporating the rune system.
I'll say I love the idea of whatever weapons you have on you being like showing up physically on your gear. So like you would have like a sword or an axe, like a one-handed sword or axe hanging from your side, daggers like in like some little pockets on your legs, or two-handed weapon across the back. Um
Mhm.
I would guess if they did do that, I like that a lot. That's actually, I think, a genius idea because it does give, I think whenever you give something that's skill expressive from a an APM, for those who don't know what APM means, actions per minute. It's basically how fast you can accurately click your mouse and keyboard to do things, right? I think it's also good to give something to people that aren't as good at that, but like they can see and notice, like, okay, this person has this on their side, this on their back, and then quickly formulate in their head, like, okay, so the best way to fight them is going to be this based off of that knowledge that I've gained. It it's a different kind of skill, right? It's using your mind and strategy over like raw physical ability. And maybe the raw physical ability, if everything plays out perfectly, will still win out. It gives the player that doesn't have that a way to fight back and close the gap. And I always like that. And I'm guessing if you did that, you'd probably need to have, I don't know, would you have to like limit the number of like weapons somebody can have on their hotbar? It might be kind of weird if like somebody's got 8 weapons on their hotbar to like try
I
to show
mean,
all of
or
them.
it could only just show like the first two or something that you have. I mean,
My answer to
yeah.
this question is relevant to that other question.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I have a suggestion. It's incredibly controversial, I'm sure, especially for PvP players.
Okay.
But from a PvE side and then immersion side, for just showing what weapons people have on them, I think one way I could live with this, and I'd completely understand that other people would despise it. But instead of having the weapons that you use to fight with being in your hotbar,
I know where
let's
you're
say
going with
you have
this.
2 weapon slots, and then let's say you like hold down F or whatever your interact key is, and you unsheath your weapon, and then you can switch to your other one at any time, probably with some sort of animation as well. And then to somewhat mitigate the inevitable complaints of people who love weapon switching, let's say there's a ability rune that doesn't actually give you an ability, but it gives you a third weapon slot and then also increases your weapon swap speed. So you're giving up an entire ability to juggle more weapons around.
Yeah, because it technically, whenever
Mm.
you another weapon also means there's another ability you have, because we you have that charged left click attack. Like that's kind of an ability on its own. So you kind of gain an ability back. It's just a base one. Um, I don't mind that. Like I was kind of thinking that too at some point. Because here's, I also hate like when I just generally when I play, and like I said before, I'm a more PvE player, and I'm a more like exploration mode vanilla play type player, although I do think PvP is fun. Um I hate having to clutter my hotbar with a bunch of junk. I just do. So like if like slot 1 was just always like, I don't know, your weapon or something like that, and then whenever you're in slot 1, you use whatever weapon is equipped in this, like, other set of slots that Brokenminifridge is talking about. Like, I don't mind that. Like, if there's 2 weapon slots, maybe even 3, I don't know, something like that. And then whenever I'm on slot 1 being the weapon slot on my hotbar, that uses whatever weapon I have. I could be okay with that. What do you think about something like that, Chayzur?
Oh, buddy, that oh my god, dude, if Fight Club heard you say that, it'd be raps for you. Oh
Yeah,
my
I'm
god.
sure, I'm sure.
But I will say, yeah, I was thinking, I was trying to work around that because
Yeah,
I think like I said, I mean, I'm telling you right now, like I don't love the weapon swapping meta. I enjoy using it right now, but it should never be a permanent thing. But at the same time, like I would never like want to remove that fun thing for other people just
yeah.
because I'm not a big fan of it. So I think
That's
that
why
there
I
needs to
suggested the rune that
yes,
gives you a third weapon slot and faster swap speed.
yes, I'm not trying to say that you're like you're anti-fun. Let me make that clear. But I'm saying that some people might just want to use like I don't think it's going to be a problem as long as it's not like overpowered. Like I think using 4 weapons, I don't think there's really a problem with that as long as a person with one that has those runes can if they are if they're more skilled than the opposing player with 4 weapons, like the amount of weapons that someone is using should not dictate who wins the fight.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that and so for that reason, I don't think having a certain amount of weapons in your inventory, like there shouldn't be a cap to that. I think that that's like the sacrifice that you have to make. Like if you want to use all of the weapons, you're gonna have to take up those slots. Or like I'm not against having the utility. Like if you had like a second utility thing where it's like, oh, you can just switch weapons, like that's completely fine as long as there's like an animation, like you said.
Yeah.
But I
It may
think
also
yeah,
balance out too if we have like other useful things in combat as well. Like you have a slot for potions, you have a slot for a food that's like a longer term buff. You have maybe a couple potions and slots or something because that's what you in combat that's going to be effective to do. You have a slot for like I don't know movement or something that's like a different thing like the hook shot or something like
So
that.
the problem with having too many dedicated slots for specific things is it's gonna clutter up the hotkeys a whole bunch, and then you're gonna be like playing Twister with your fingers on your keyboard in certain situations. I'm not saying they couldn't do that, but I think leaving everything that isn't a weapon in the hotbar is perfectly fine. Although, like sheathing specifically to like drink a healing potion or eat could get annoying, especially in PvP. So maybe like you could have like one healing item or something for a specific slot as well. I know Terraria has hotkeys
yeah,
specifically for like this is the drink your healing potion button, this is the mana
Yeah.
potion button, and then this button drinks all of your potions all at once.
yeah. I mean, the hardest part about this when it comes to game design is just making everyone happy. It's like you can't sacrifice one for the other. Like
You
objectively,
also You also need to
but
balance for console too. Like we know it's going to be
yeah,
on console, and on console you only have so many buttons. So if you make it to where so many buttons are needed for so many things, what you're gonna end up doing is you also then are forced to segment out console players versus PC players. Like you would have to have separate lobbies for everything. Otherwise, PC wins the fight 100% of the time against console, which nobody on console, of course, is going to like. So, like, you also have that you have to consider as well. So, like, when things go in the hotbar, I mean, technically it's kind of a little bit easier for PC players to switch a little bit quicker things on the hotbar, but like for the most part, it's not a crazy difference. But like if you have like a different like hotkey that does like all sorts of different things, obviously a console player is not going to be able to take advantage of like almost any of those. At which point they're at a
I
significant
guess
disadvantage to those that
they
can
could
use hotkeys.
utilize they could utilize the like the wheel mechanic of like we have the offhand wheel and then there's the emote wheel, so they could do that for like potions and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I was saying. I guess there's yeah, yeah. That's what I was referring to. Like the Z, like pressing Z, holding down Like you have like that ring of like an instant like swap to it. I think that'd work.
Yeah, that could maybe work. I mean, ultimately, I don't think like hotbar management is too big of a deal because when it comes to PvP, then it's like, what do you prioritize? Like, if you really want to be a crazy person that has like 4 different weapons still, then maybe you're going to have one less utility item in your hotbar that puts you at a disadvantage
Yeah.
versus somebody else. Yeah, I wanted to bring this to you, Brokenminifridge, specifically. Like, we're going to rewind a little bit. So um, we talked about how you like to carry a lot of different weapons for a lot of different things. It's definitely critical in PvP in today's Hytale. With the rune system at its base for what we know right now, do you think you're going to feel like you need to carry a lot of different weapons around to do things, or are you going to feel like having, it's not going to be as important and you're going to be able to more comfortably go into PvE combat, go fight bosses or whatever things with not having to clutter your hotbar with a ton of different weapons?
I mean, I definitely probably have less weapons on me at a time. At the end of the day, right now, I could just live with a sword and shield, but it's usually whatever I'm doing in exploration mode currently, it's not for like specifically to fight stuff.
Yeah.
It's to like gather resources or things. So I just want to kill everything in my way as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So that's why I have everything on me for different situations. But if I were just like straight up like exploring a dungeon for fun, then yeah, I probably wouldn't be like min-maxing my weapons and stuff.
And then just to go back to something Chayzur said earlier too, when we talk about like weapon swapping, I do think weapon swapping definitely has a place, right? Like I think of like even if you want to like try to take things to like a more like real life view of things, like would it be so uncommon for somebody to have like a short sword on their side with a shield, but then also have like a larger sword like on their back that they could pull out? And then also there's synergy there too, right? Like when it comes to like actual gameplay, is like I could take things that are like maybe a little bit more broadly sword specific, and then sword and shield versus two-handed sword have like they both synergize together well and have a big benefit together. Versus I could do something that's weapon and shield centered, and I could have, okay, well, one-handed mace, one-handed axe, one-handed sword. Like I could technically swap those. They all work with the shield. So I do think you definitely want to keep the ability to like synergize without letting it be too crazy. And I think that's probably where maybe we can all agree is maybe the like animation, like sheathing, unsheathing thing when it comes to weapon swapping is probably one of the better ways to balance it. And when you base it on the size or the weight of a weapon to some extent, that I think that adds like a good level of balance to where people can still do it. um the animation's only going to matter probably in like crazy combat situations in PvP. It's probably not going to matter when you're like fighting PvE enemies. You usually have like lulls where that half a second's not going to be the end of you,
Yeah,
maybe if,
you'd only be doing that if you want to like min-max optimal damage and kill
yeah.
something as fast as possible.
I mean, you could have like different types of enemies that warrant it, right? Like maybe I'm sword and shielding when like there's little like I don't like let's say we're fighting a boss, right? And we know bosses, one of the things they might have is like they spawn waves of enemies on you, like when they go through their phases. So like I could get spawned a whole bunch of small like add-on mobs, and like maybe for some reason, like maybe I want to have my shield out for that because some of them have ranged attacks and I want to kill them there like that. But then I want to swap to my two-hand weapon to fight the boss because the boss doesn't really have like this particular boss doesn't have attacks that are good to block with a shield. It's so I want the raw damage output of my two-handed weapon. So I could definitely see scenarios where like that's a thing. And also when we talk about weapon swapping, your ranged weapon is a weapon too. So like a lot of times you might at least want to carry like a bow or something with you, even if it's just like a base default bow that doesn't have any like runes specific for it. You're probably still going to want some type of range damage too. So we're still going to have that, I think.
Yeah, as long as the skill expression is still there, as long as
Yeah.
they're as long as they don't like can weapon swapping, but
Yeah.
like you can make do with it and it's not the best. Like if I were to make it like yeah, if I was to reiterate any point, it would just be that like I'm fully for weapon swapping still existing as long as it's just not like overwhelmingly objectively the best meta. Like someone with one weapon with their runes should be able to stand up to someone who is on us like the same skill level of someone with 4 weapons.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's move on. We're kind of getting into some of the last topics here before we finish up. But this is a big one. It's rune crafting. And last time we kind of segued into some of this, and we haven't had um too many natural points to it. So I'm going to kind of include this as part of the question here. Um, for those of you that don't know, like just to the broader audience, we know that rune crafting is going to be a thing that exists, but outside of that, we don't really know anything. So um maybe they have a lot of it planned out already. Maybe they don't, and they just know that they want rune crafting to be a thing. So I guess let me start out with this. We'll go to Chayzur on this one first. So, like, what would you like to see out of rune crafting? Do you think you should be able to craft every rune? Do you think that you should maybe eventually be able to craft every rune, but you have to like find some of them first? Do you think that some runes should only be like findable and never be able to be crafted under any condition? Like, or like, what other special characteristics do you think that you would like to see within rune crafting?
There's a lot of things that rune crafting can do. I think obviously finding them like that's just going to be a thing. I think something that I haven't really heard that was talked about a lot is being able to interact with villagers and do. I think Fridge made maybe a somewhat similar point about like being able to like at a quest line
Yeah.
you get certain runes and stuff. But I really think that like certain like if we were doing like kill quests and stuff, like even if it wasn't like a storyline quest, like there's an opportunity for like a rune to be a part of the loot pool for doing this. And I think you know, if we can trade with these villagers, I'm referring to like villagers as in like the
Broad
Quebecs and like
sense.
all the factions.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in you know every any type of NPC that can trade. But it'd be cool if like if I found a rune throughout the world and I wanted another one, by finding the first one, it basically unlocks the ability for me to be able to trade with a villager around the world to receive that same rune, just so that like if I had a friend or whatever, it's like I've already found it. I think that makes sense multiplayer wise, because if the world, you know, if everyone's on one continent, like let's say that, you know, the Mytel SMP, like if everyone's on one continent and if a person finds a rune that someone else wants, that way it kind of like opened the pool of like, okay, this is another way I can obtain it. I think there just should be a lot of ways to obtain them. I don't know if they should specifically be like locked behind finding versus crafting. Like I don't know about that. I definitely just think that there should be several ways you can obtain them. I think trading for me that's like the biggest thing. Like I know rune forging is like quite literally crafting them, but I do think it'd be cool if some can be just be like found by trading. I think that'd just be awesome. Maybe like respective to like their elements. So, like I could find like an earth type of thing from like the Quebecs or something. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of where I stand with that. I believe, but I don't. I think being able to craft. We also don't know if we can upgrade them. That's another thing,
Yeah, we're
which
gonna
is
get
a
to
very
upgrading
tricky
part in
one.
just a second here. Fridge, what are your thoughts?
I think there should be a healthy combination of like different ways to obtain runes. Like some you should be able to craft, especially like some really early on simple ones, um, and then some more like thematic ones. I think if you want, if you can craft them, it should be in areas where it would make sense to at least get the materials to craft them,
Okay.
or at least upgrade them depending on how that works. And then I think some from specific factions or specific bosses, some that should drop some runes. I never even considered trading, but Chayzur makes a good point. I think if the like say a village has like a wizard NPC or something, they could sell it. Or I guess like a warrior, depending on whatever rune it is. Um, But yeah, I think it's good to have like a healthy diversity. I think it'd make more sense for you to be able to craft like the actually never mind, scratch that. I think I did this in the first attempt as well. But it's do you think that you should be finding more ability runes or modifier runes?
Um, I think so. I think that's a good question. I think first of all, when it comes to crafting, I think a lot of the like you're probably going to have like a wide variety of skill runes that we can find. I think some will kind of consider to be kind of basic. Like when I think of a fireball, it's kind of a basic spell versus like a flamethrower type ability is maybe a little bit less basic. So I think the more like basic in how they work runes that we'll probably find earlier in the game, I think it's okay for those to both exist as like kind of normal-ish loot, but also just base craftable. But like you said, it be like materials that you would get from that particular area, and it's not stuff that's like ultra common because it's fun to just have more like loot that you have to go out and find. So maybe maybe rune crafting is the recipe is a little bit more complex, right? They could cost higher quantities of materials, or they can cost a more variety of materials. Maybe 5 or 6 different materials are the cost to craft a rune. And then I think that when you talk about modifier runes, I think it's okay to start shifting those to be more of a find thing, but a possible to craft thing or like a recipe thing. I don't know, because like you have to have the skill runes. Like it would suck to just be unlucky when you open chests and like here you are like an hour into a playthrough and like, bro, I don't have any skill runes yet. Like all I can do is left click. That's not fun. So you definitely want to give people a solid path to get a few basic skills regardless of what weapon they have. But the modifier runes are they're not really needed to have fun. They're needed to become more powerful, and by essence of that, you also have fun with them too, like, they can also be fun. So I think it's okay to shift them more to finding, and then I would probably also say that, like, some things I think are okay to be, like, never crafted, only found, but, like, I'm
Yeah.
talking about rare case, like we talked about, like, bosses before. It feels kinda dumb that you would be able to craft a boss rune. Like, the only place you should be able to get that is off the boss or, like, off of the elite that it comes from. So if you wanna get more of it, you gotta go fight the boss again, bro. Like, if you want your buddy to have one, then go grind the boss. I don't think you should ever be able to craft those. But again, those wouldn't be more or less powerful than anything else. It would just be like a different option to use. So you would never feel like, well, I can't get the boss rune. Like I can't do my next, like I can't go kill the next boss. It would just be more of a, yo, that's like really fun to use. There's a cool interaction I want to try with that. Therefore, that's why I want to get it, not because you feel like you have to.
Yeah. After further thinking about this, I think some early game like crafting should definitely like exist. We also just don't know how it's going to work because we know that like the crafting stuff is going to get like more involved with the world itself.
Yeah.
So like it's probably not just going to be like a crafting
Click a
station.
button.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm interested to see like what that will physically look like in the world and how interactive that's going to be. But yeah, dude. Like, I think being able to craft them in the beginning, it should definitely, like you said, you made a good point. If you don't end up finding anything in the beginning, that's gonna suck. So
You ever played like a RPG type game where like it just takes forever to like get some initial skills to have fun with, and you just get kind of bored versus the opposite of that, which is like, yo, like I just killed a couple basic mobs. Now I have like my first skill to use, and the skill looks kind of cool, and like it's just that makes it fun, you know?
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's. I think being able to dive into the skills like early game is definitely gonna like. I think that'll also really help like with retention of the game, like just
Yeah.
having like people joining the game for the first time, being like, oh, I can mess around with skills. Like introducing that early, I think should definitely be important.
I think it'd be cool to like have certain skills be like locked in like behind other stuff too. again, not ones that are more like effective, but like ones that are still effective. I'm not talking about like the meme type skills, but like skills that are useful that are found in other areas. Like let's say like I just get crazy into fishing, and fishing is this like crazy depth mechanic in Hytale where you can
Fascinating.
you can progress through like, rods and reels and baits and fishing in different areas for different things. Like it could become like this whole big thing. Same thing for farming, same thing for animal husbandry. I don't know how they derive skills from those things, but it would be cool if there is, if not skills that you like directly find there, but crafting elements that you can get via those things where like you can find some additional cool skills by diving deep into that, or more so I think of this more for like multiplayer servers, right? Like I think back to my time playing like WoW and other games. Like usually you would have like somebody that's like really good at crafting stuff, and like they take different professions, right? Like you as an individual player are probably not going to be into everything, or like time sink yourself into going down every single rabbit hole, but some people do. So like in WoW, you would have somebody that's like really good at like crafting like certain types of weapons. Well, Hytale's not going to go that far, but you may have somebody that, like, they just freaking love to fish, and that's all they do. And they find cool stuff from fishing, and one of those cool things would supply people that like combat more, like Chayzur or whatever. Like Chayzur can go interact with the dude in the server that likes to do the fishing and get this really cool skill that he couldn't find or get himself because he didn't want to do all the fishing stuff. And again, it's not because it's better, it's just because it's just something different and fun for him to interact with and use. Like, do you think that would be a cool way? Like, is it good to put those types of things further down those paths as long as they're not like overpowered and make you feel like you're forced to like do something you don't want to do, or would it like inadvertently have that effect anyway?
I mean, I think having like specific runes that can only be obtained through a certain method, like I know we don't want to lock progression, but like, are we really gonna sit here and say that like having to go fish for a rune that you want is progression? Like I'm like, look, I'm all for, not forcing players into doing something they don't want to do, but like if you're telling me that like you really want this rune for your weapon, let's say there's like a book or something in the game that like tells you about some of them, and you're like, oh man, I really want this one. It's like, how do I obtain this one? Let's buy fishing. And like, they're just not going to go out of their way to go fish somewhere or whatever to get that rune. I think that's less of a game problem, more of like a player decision. I don't think that's a bad thing
Yeah.
whatsoever. I think that just adds more incentive to do certain things in the game that you wouldn't have thought before. And hey, maybe like, you realize that you enjoy fishing more than you thought you would have,
You could
so.
maybe even go like a small step further with it, and like maybe some of that stuff is technically obtainable in the world, like loot. Like I'm talking about, you go to like certain structures and you loot search or kill bosses or something. Like maybe you can find that stuff there, but like if you want the for sure way to get it and probably get it a little bit faster without just getting dumb luck, fishing would be your way to do it. But hey, maybe when you find a certain dungeon and you go through it and you open a bunch of chests, maybe you just get lucky and it's there, and it's like a 0.01% chance or something. Like it's a 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 chance that you find it, and you just happen to get lucky. So technically you can get it other ways if you grind enough, but you could just also just take the easy way and like grind fishing progression for several hours and just have fun fishing. Like you could do it either way, or buy it off of your fishing buddy in the server and trade them something that they like, or whatever the currency in the server is.
Can
Broken,
I
what do you
just
think?
say it's really funny that you're using fishing as your example for multiple reasons. One is like my last two videos have been about just fishing
Yeah,
in Hytale.
yeah, yeah.
But also before the game even came out, I made a wish list video, and one of the things on it was like I kind of said it as a joke, but I'd love to see it along with like other things like it for different aspects like farming and stuff. But I said a fully implemented fishing progression system with like so essentially if you wanted you could just like you could spawn in, make a fishing rod, start fishing, and then get like gear that's better and better, and technically like beat the entire game with just stuff you got from fishing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think
So
stuff like that is fun. You know, I think I said this to you guys last time. Like, I kind of have like a general rule in my head when I think about like game design stuff. Whenever I make suggestions for things or whatever, which is I feel like there should, especially in a sandbox game, specifically in a sandbox game, you should always have like at least 3 ways for somebody to do stuff because ultimately you want people to be able to play the game the way that they want to play. You never want to force people to do stuff they don't want to do. Like for somebody that only likes to do fishing, you don't want to force them to do a lot of crazy combat. Of course, they have to interact with it as part of the game, but you don't want to make them have to do like dozens and dozens of hours of like gear progression and then grinding dungeons and then grinding bosses all day because that's not what they have fun doing. But also you don't want to do that the other way. You don't want to take somebody that likes doing the combat, the adventure, the exploring, the looting, the boss killing. You don't want to make them grind fishing for a week straight either. So you should definitely have like there could be most effective ways to get stuff, but then there should always be other ways to get the stuff if it's especially if it's like something that's a necessary part of the game or whatever. Skills may or may not fall into that because again, like they can just be you could have some skills that are just kind of fun and meme like, or you could have skills that are just a different variation of something else that's not more or less effective. But that's usually good for there to be like ways for people to interact with the game the way they want to.
in order to get certain things without having to interact with like that entire system that it's involved with, they could do something with like NPCs and merchants.
Yeah.
Like there's it depends on how they approach traders in the long run,
Hmm.
but maybe if you don't want to fish, you could find like an angler NPC and you could trade with him for some of the stuff. If they do like a level up your merchants type thing, then
Ooh,
trade with him more,
I
then
have a
you
genius
can get
idea.
the better stuff. Or if they don't do that, then I maybe just like a rotating inventory of things that might like you might see better stuff depending on how the game tracks progression, like at certain thresholds of you progressing the game.
Hmm. I have what I think is a genius idea here. Maybe they're going to do this already, but you know how we're getting these like companion NPCs that we can have like chop wood for us or smash metal for us, like kind of like generate materials, right?
Yeah.
Based off the artwork we saw for chapter one. Like, what if like I could? Why can't I? I mean, I could have a NPC that's going to like pick crops and stuff for me, right? And that would help me, in theory, progress my
That's a
like crop bench
fantastic
type thing.
idea.
But like also like fish, like why can't I have an NPC that like fishes for me and can help me progress the fishing side of the game? It would be slower than if I did it myself, probably. Like it would probably be better if it's slower. So that way I don't feel like the meta is to just let something else do something for me that I would otherwise find fun to do. Like if I like fishing, I'm going to fish. But if it's faster to have the NPC do it, I don't want to be incentivized to let the NPC to do it for me. But if it could do it on a longer time scale than a player could, and let's say I hate fishing, well, I can set up an NPC to do it, interact with them every so often to like keep the progression going, and then I could progress fishing over a longer period of time. So then I can interact with more of that like closer to end game ish fishing. And it may be like you have to grind like the very end of it more yourself because like if you really want to master it and get the most out of it, that could be something that could work really good, I think.
Honestly, I think that's a better idea than my merchant idea because then it's still like a progression thing and not just, oh, you got to go out and find this one specific type of NPC. Instead,
Yeah.
it's just it's like your base is growing while you're out doing things still. Maybe you can like upgrade the NPC so that they can get like the better stuff naturally or something.
Yeah. I want to start wrapping things up a little bit. So I want to touch on this last topic and then see what you guys think about it. So leveling up skills via rune crafting, right? So um maybe a skill's not just a skill. Maybe fireball is not always fireball. And in these types of games, like I think about Diablo and stuff like that, other RPG games, like usually you would like spend skill points to like go like fireball level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, etc. and you like level it up to make it stronger. So maybe like, what do you think about rune crafting? All like maybe would be more, even more for that, right? So maybe you don't maybe if you find a rune, it could be a boss rune, it could be a fireball rune, whatever. Maybe you just always kind of find that base rune, and then your rune crafting is required to level it up. And then to make sure we keep progression good in the game so somebody can't just like instantly go up to like super crazy powerful like runes by just spamming like one material at it or something like that. Um they like you have increased costs when it comes to increased power. So Fireball 2 is stronger than Fireball 1, but also costs more mana. So if I don't have the gear that gives me more mana to be able to handle a higher level of Fireball, then having a higher tier Fireball is not going to matter a whole lot. So it kind of like you kind of still have to progress everything together. You can't just like, hey, I'm just going to rush Fireball 5 and incinerate everything super easy because you don't even have enough mana to cast Fireball 5, bro, much less cast it multiple times. You need to get all of the gear that's going to allow you to do that. So you still have to go through the other side of progression. Do you think that would be a good idea for rune crafting and progression within the rune system itself to have like leveling of the runes in this way? Or do you have another idea? Chayzur, we'll start with you.
I think that could be a pretty good way of having like some sort of like subtle progression system, because if you could upgrade the skills over time, like let's say someone has a fireball skill and they're like, oh, this is awesome, but like they want to prioritize like building in the early game, so like they can just have that skill and they don't really need to feel forced to do anything. But if they want to go out of their way and like maybe they want to get more into combat and they want to kind of develop their build more, and just for the sake of this specific example, let's say like by evolving or I don't know, leveling up a certain rune, it kind of slightly changes it. Like for a fireball, maybe it makes it ever so slightly bigger, and
Yeah, yeah,
obviously it
yeah.
does more damage.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, and the cost of that, like you said, would be like using more mana. So by that logic, it's like, okay, if I can still use my ability, but like maybe I can only cast it once. So that way, the progression in this sense for the sandbox part of it would be, I want to go get better gear that increases my mana, or I want to go into alchemy and make potions that temporarily increase my mana so I can use my weapon. So I think that that's like a subtle hinting at like a progression system that isn't necessarily forced. But if you want to get more into combat and you want to like evolve your weapon more, then you have to get the gear that will fit that, and you have to, increase your mana or whatever it will take to, use these weapons if it is mana.
And Minifridge, as I bring this to you, I think also it could probably add a lot of like additional progression to the game that fits different players differently. So like maybe from a power scaling perspective, like Fireball 3 or tier 3 of a particular skill, it's really probably all like the average player needs to do average player things. But somebody like maybe yourself, maybe you super enjoy PvE combat, you want to defeat everything, you want to beat the hardest bosses, you're going to need to get the higher skills, right? You might need to go to Fireball 4, Fireball 5, or to more optimize your build. And then before you answer, one other thing would be I think it adds in like customization, like it fits more of the sandbox side of customization, which is I could go up to Fireball 5 and cast that spell and do bigger damage like maybe 3 or 4 times before I drain my mana, just as an example. Or I could make the choice to keep Fireball at 3, and then like I can almost infinite cast that because the mana cost is really low and I have a lot of mana because I have in-game gear. So it gets to it starts to become a cool choice that the player gets to make of spend more mana, do more damage, or spend less damage, or spend less mana but do damage more frequently. How do you feel about this system? And then how do you feel about that fitting into rune crafting?
So that system sounds very similar to how spell slots and spells work in Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
where you can cast like a certain spell at level 1 with a level 1 spell slot. or you can upcast it to a level 3 version, which will do more damage, but it'll take a level 3 spell slot, and you only have so many of so many spell slots once per long rest. So you have a limited amount of times you can cast the spell and a
Yeah.
limited amount of spell slots. So if you want to use your highest level spell slot, then uh, if you use it by upcasting a smaller spell, then you can't use any of the more complicated spells that you can't like downcast. You can only use like that highest level spell slot.
Hmm.
So something like that could work, although being able switching the thing with this system in Dungeons and Dragons is you can just specify, oh, I cast this at this level. In Hytale, you'd have to like manually like figure out a way to lower the level of a spell or increase it, which would be complicated to do.
Maybe you
But
and
even the simplest way, you'd probably have to open your inventory.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like maybe like this would be a reason to have multiple of the same rune too. Like I could maybe carry like a I keep using fireball, so I'll just keep doing that. I could have a fireball 3 rune and a fireball 5 rune on me, and then I could always open my inventory really quick and swap them when needed, if that's the way that I wanted to play.
I think if we were to do this system, I'd say once you've upgraded your rune, you don't need a second of the same rune at a lower level. I'd say just like put an up and down arrow on the next by the icon just to change what level you're at, instead of having to like juggle 4 of the exact same rune at just different levels.
Yeah.
But it's just balancing balancing damage of these abilities is gonna be a nightmare for the developers unless they already have something planned, because it's either runes will depreciate or you have to figure out some system to upgrade them as you progress through the game. They could do like the more you use this ability, the stronger it gets, but people will cheese that or like not use it as much as they should in in like a later game area, or maybe they'll just like make it so that adamantite level difficulty enemies is like the hardest the game gets, and then from there on it just gets difficult in like other ways with like smarter enemies or something, and then at that point you don't even need to worry about balancing the abilities anymore.
Yeah. Um any final thoughts, Chayzur, about the rune crafting and interaction system that you have?
Um, Not really. I was kind of just enjoying. Dude, I forgot I was here for a second. I was just enjoying it, man. That was a. I like that. I really like that. Yeah. No. I mean, you pretty much said what I was thinking. So yeah, I'm just interested more than anything to see how crafting will actually work. Like what it will look like. That's
Yeah.
mainly like where I'm heading.
Mini fridge. Any final thoughts about the system?
uh Well, I mean, I obviously I look forward to seeing it. I am curious, specifically how they're gonna go about like equipping runes, and of course, if they're gonna do like items or like a collection. I think it'd be interesting. I'm not saying everyone would love this idea, but I think it'd be interesting if, in order to switch what abilities you have to do it at like a specific like workbench or maybe in the Forgotten Temple, instead of just being able to do it on the fly in your inventory. That'd be
Yeah.
controversial, of course, but it would make you have to like commit to whatever you have equipped. But then if you want like a utility ability instead of a combat one, and you don't have it equipped, then tough luck, I guess. So that could be a complaint for that.
Mm,
But if it is like a workbench or something, you could just carry it on you. But then at that point, just let people switch straight from their inventories anyways,
yeah.
because what's the point?
Um all right. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap things up here. I appreciate both of you guys being on today. Chayzur, can you tell everybody all the social media and platforms and such they can find you on?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, you can just find me anywhere with the tag Chayzur, except my Twitch, which is Chayzur A, Chayzur AY. Some goofball stole it, so I'm gonna reach out to him pretty soon. We're gonna have a word. But yeah, especially on YouTube, I do a lot of combat and like video essay style stuff. So if you enjoy that, then check me out. I actually did do a video about the rune system stuff. So if you
Awesome.
want like
Definitely check that
my
out.
entire thoughts, yeah, appreciate it.
Brokenminifridge, where can everybody find you?
On YouTube, I'm just Brokenminifridge, one word, and then on Twitter, I'm Broken Cold Box because Brokenminifridge has been taken since the dawn of Twitter. I make a variety of Hytale content, anything from like guides that I think need to be made, or like a deep dive into how caves generate or how the ocean is generating. I also have done lore videos, theory videos, so I'm pretty diverse in the Hytale front.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys being on. This has been another episode or our first episode of the Hytale HQ. So I appreciate both you guys coming on to the HQ podcast. Be sure if you're watching this to subscribe on Twitch, or sorry, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify. Those are the two areas, at least for now, that we're going to be putting the episodes. Join our Discord channel if you'd like to be part of the discussion. I do have areas there where you can recommend guests, where you can ask our guests questions if you would like to. And otherwise, press that like button. Thank you guys so much for being here. We're going to do these. This is going to be the format that we do these in. We're going to have multiple guests. Guests can and most certainly will return as we talk about these different topics. And you guys have a great day. Thanks so much. It's time for all three of us to hightail it out of here, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.